So first, welcome, Bob Marley. Much appreciated. Always happy to see you. It's been definitely a minute. I think it's been about 3 weeks I last streamed, since that unfortunate fact that the workout streams have to be placed on hold, that the private gym studio that I was renting out to do my workouts has shut down. That definitely kind of took a little bit of a toll on me psychologically. I can be honest about that. I definitely was not planning on that happening. I can I definitely still find it funny now, and I found it funny in the moment, just how life works. Of it's literally nothing. Nothing ever occurred to me in that vein of oh, this space would shut down. I was totally not prepared for that. Just because that the company had been around for 5 years at that point. And as I mentioned in the Discord, they were expanding pretty rapidly and quickly. And so I just kind of assumed, well, I'm not a business person, so this is probably just a reflection of my ignorance of how businesses work. But I just kind of assumed that given the fact that they were rapidly expanding, that it's a sign that the business is doing well. And that I can count on it being around for a pretty long while. It wasn't my intention that I would stream there forever. Since, like I mentioned in the Discord, it's a pure cost to me. It's totally, not only did I have to invest in the equipment, stream from there, which was a decently significant investment. Although, thankfully, I save up for these things, so it wasn't a huge loss per se. And I'm sure I can make use of the equipment that I bought somewhere down the road. But yeah, I was also paying to rent out the space twice a week. Well, at least it started off with once a week. I think I was doing that for a year, and then I moved up to twice a week. And I also extended the length of the workouts. That made it even more costlier. When I was doing it once a week, it was $40 a week. And then when I increased the workout streams, invest in the equipment, it's workout streams twice a week, and for 2.5, 3 hours at a time, it was $150, $200 a week. So basically $800 a month. Canadian, so maybe it's $1 American, so maybe not that much. But still, pretty significant. Yeah, totally. It was, so it's not my air, so might as well just dive right into it. But yeah, I apologize for my absence, if anybody cares. But totally, like I said, I wasn't planning. If the workout streams, if the space hadn't closed down, I still would have done the workout streams. But it's a little bit demotivated, since I missed the workout streams. I still obviously go to the gym, and now I'm just going to my public gym, the usual public gym. And other life things happened that also kind of set me back a little bit. Overall, I'm fine. I might eat my words down the road, but I'll more or less always be fine. I'll update sort of future, sort of not greatest life events in future streams coming up. But all that aside, happy to be back. Overall, I'm doing well. These things I know are just part of life. Setbacks happen, and I'm always kind of aware that you can't really count on anything. But I will totally admit that I was not counting on the space cutting down. Where it's yeah, it's not just my area. It's basically, it appears to be the entire company. Literally, so I got this on the Tuesday. So my workout streams, they took place on Wednesday afternoons and Saturday afternoons. And literally, I got this email containing this message on the Tuesday before my scheduled Wednesday workout, which obviously didn't end up happening, as they said effective Wednesday at 6 a.m. They're pausing all operations indefinitely. So, maybe there's a glimmer of hope that they'll reopen, but I'm not banking on. But yeah, all existing bookings will be canceled, and no new bookings will be permitted beyond this date. No further charges will occur. I'm yeah, whatever. It was a shock to me at the time. It definitely impacts my routine and whatever, my business. Although it was not a money-making business at all. Pure cost. Pure... Oh, wow. Thank you so much for the sub. Much appreciated. Yeah, I'll take whatever I can get. And I'm always grateful for any type of support, especially coming from you. Not only support from the sub, but also the support in terms of all the great resources and research that you provide. Like, I don't take that for granted. And I also, as much as I can criticize it, I appreciate the economic perspective that you bring. And I definitely count on you as sort of like my resident economics expert. More so than me, as much as I cover economics research, criticize it. So yeah, there's maybe a glimmer of hope that'll reopen, but I'm not banking on it. So we'll see. As I mentioned in Discord, I am committed to bringing the workout streams back in some capacity. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know how long it's going to be. I may have scoped out the space tentatively. I might have to, like, convince a person that for me to stream from their gym. So I might have to, bring out my marketing and sales side, so to speak. Or, it'll be a test of how charismatic I can be. Which also, on that note, I'm getting a little bit of sidetracked on charisma. This is like a little bit of a story. So I had a stream planned like 2 weeks ago. Or no, it was like last week. Where, yeah, I wanted to kind of like cover research on charisma. Because like, this is like a personal story, not super personal, but just an example of just like, I don't know where my brain goes based off of the interaction that I have with people. Where, yeah, I go, in addition to the private gym studio that I used to rent out, I go to a public gym. I still go to a public gym. Now I'm going to a public gym every day, as opposed to, the days that I'm not streaming my workouts, the private space. I happen to know, thankfully, a lot of people at the public gym that I go to. Some of them, I know them from that particular space, that particular public gym that I go to. Also, other people that I know there, they are literally similar to me, migrants from another gym. Since my previous gym before the pandemic, the YMCA, it was shut down as a result of the pandemic and has not reopened. And so, like, me and other YMCA members migrated there. And this person had been a familiar face to me for like many years, and we've pretty much had only small talk of like, hi, how are you? How's life? Blah blah blah. Your typical kind of like small talk, surface level conversation. Which, that's not a complaint, just an observation. And like, I always enjoy the interactions. Ever, and it seems like they enjoy the interactions too. Because, yeah, it was like last week, whatever, on like a Thursday or Friday, whatever. I saw them at the gym. They approached me, and they approached me with like some intention. They want to ask a specific question, and the specific question they asked was, "What do I do for work?" Or what my job is. And I told them what my job is. I'm a scientist. I work for a biotech startup. And they were a little bit surprised by that, because, they shared their intention of why they asked that question, because they just kind of assumed, maybe understandably assumed, that my job included working with people, because, like, this was their words. They said, "Oh, I work, each time that I've interacted with you has always been enjoyable, and you seem like a charismatic person, and so I just thought, you dealt with people." And I was kind of like shocked at the time. Not like shocked in a good way, in terms of like that was, as I said to them, that was a very kind thing to say. I don't identify myself as a charismatic person. I've never viewed myself that way. But it was just kind of like an interesting kind of interaction where, how do people observe you? What are the ways in which people observe you? Maybe some of the judgments that they make, and how does that overlap or not with how you perceive yourself? These are always interesting things to me. I would have never used the word charisma to describe myself. Not even on my radar. And maybe this individual just has a totally different definition of charisma, like entirely different, concept of charisma than how it's typically used. I have no idea. But either way, I took it as a compliment. They definitely intended it as a compliment, and that was a very kind thing to say. And it totally kind of like made my day to a certain extent. And like, I'm not gonna lie, like the day after, I did a little bit of research on charisma, or like tried to see if there is actually any research on charisma. Turns out there is, not surprisingly. And maybe I'll cover that at some point, where it's like, what is charisma, and can you define someone as charismatic? I don't even know really what the strict definition of charisma. But anyways, that's a tangent. All that to say, for the time being, all I have to offer is science and research streams, which is not like a bad thing. These are also the streams that I love. But I also do and did love the workout stream. I'm committed to bring them back. And I think there's some hope that it could be sooner rather than later. There appears to be a small semi-private gym opening up close to me. But I believe it's like a calisthenics type of gym. And I actually sort of know the person or group of people who are opening it. I say no, more or less through contacts through social media. I know who the owner of that gym is going to be. So maybe I can convince them to allow me access to the space. But that's really, kind of like a Hail Mary. Maybe the more realistic, long term of how the workout streams will come back is through home workouts. It's just a matter of investing in equipment. I mean, at the end of the day, I have no problem doing home workouts with no equipment. That's totally a thing. I can still practice my handstands from home. But as of right now, the space that oh, April, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. And also thank you so much for the kind words. Much appreciated. I hope you're doing well. I definitely, seeing you in Celsi streams, and Shy streams. Always great to see you. So I would want a barbell. As much as I enjoy bodyweight workouts, as much as I can do them, at least for me, nothing beats a barbell and dumbbells. So I would want to invest in the equipment in a barbell, do deadlifting and squats. But what I can say is like my space is not adapted for having a barbell, and also I live in an apartment complex, so there's people below me. So even though I don't slam down my weights, I still put them down. So I wouldn't want to do that to anybody living below or whatever surrounding me. But I also don't plan to stay in this space forever. And actually, I do want to move sooner rather than later. But, moving in this day and age appears to be kind of like a tricky thing. Or, finding affordable housing or reasonable housing appears to be a tricky thing these days. And whatever, I'm pretty much a minimalist. So I don't need a lot of space, and I'm pretty lucky in the sense that, what I currently pay for in rent is actually, given the increased cost of living and an increase in rent, I pay a pretty low rate for pretty decently nice space. Not a lot of space, but it's nice for me, and I don't really require a lot of space. But, yeah, I do eventually want to relocate. And ideally, I want to relocate to a place where, I could invest in equipment or home workouts. But that's, probably, very long term. Maybe starting next year. My plan. Able to work. Yeah, I've been bouncing around also. I'm consistently meeting people in the fitness space. It's so funny. Again, just a testament to how funny life can be, where I was getting, I feel like I was gaining some momentum in terms of building, my fitness community, in addition to my science community as well. Like I love both of these because they're a part of me. And then, as I feel like I was getting into the fitness community, and felt the love from the fitness community, uh, I had to put the workout streaks on hold. Such is life. Yeah, so I've been doing overall, like, well, as much as, I might be complaining now of, like, these setbacks. At the end of the day, these are not, like, giant, like, life setbacks. These are just, like, these are my own personal ambitions, right? At the end of the day, I was very lucky, very fortunate, that I was in a position to rent out a space like that, twice a week. As I said earlier, it was a pure cost to me. Basically, like, $700-800 a month. And I was doing that, I think at that point, for at least, 6 to 8 months. So, pure cost. So on the bright side, I am saving money. Which is, virtually never, it is never a bad thing. So, gotta take the good with the bad. And I was totally was and still am in a place of some privilege. To be able to, afford to rent out that space on a regular basis. In addition to investing in the equipment to stream from that space. I had sort of grand plans. I first originally started streaming from my phone, and I recognized not the greatest quality streaming from my phone. And so I was like, yeah, with intention, I invested in a better camera and better audio and mic. But, like I said, I'm sure I can use the equipment somewhere down the road. Not like a complete loss. Or whatever, I can sell it. Everything's still in pristine condition. Still awesome that you have a plan in place for the future, though. Yeah. I am still able to work out. I have my regular gym membership. And I have, my real-life fitness community. That, I love and don't take for granted. I know a lot of people at my public gym, which I'm super appreciative of. But also at the same time, I love the workout streams. Like, I loved sharing information. I loved meeting people like you, April, and other people from the fitness communities. Celtsy, Shy, P1 Fitness. I should probably start shouting these people out. So let's see if I could do these things properly. But yeah, Celtsy. And try great fitness and workout streamers. Yeah, I'm super happy as well. I'm $1 a month and I have which, well, I mean, we're in different places in life. You're a student, although technically I guess I'm technically still a student too. But like, your focus is on your academic. So that's not a bad thing. And, that might just be a reflection of the privileged position I was and am in. Playing science attendant. Oh. I wish I could say I didn't have to spend. Yeah, believe me, I feel you on that. Like I said, I'm in a very fortunate position that I could afford these things. But all that aside, let's dig into the main topics. I do have a stream prepared, a research stream prepared. I've had this kind of like prepared, sitting on the back burner for a decent amount of time. We're gonna cover, I've covered self-compassion. I've covered, I I don't think I fully covered self-compassion. There's a lot of research about self-compassion, but I've covered a little bit of it. I've covered, why we shouldn't generally shame people for anything, especially when it comes to, weight loss and fitness and health habits. Shame just is not a good motivator. And that is borne out in the research pretty robustly, in my mind. And just like generally speaking, shame is not a good motivator for any change in behavior, really, in my opinion. Except for like some very niche areas. And even then, I think there are much better ways to go about it. And then in that vein of self-compassion and, not shaming, there's the concept of self-acceptance, which we're going to cover a little bit of, and the importance of self-acceptance, which I think falls pretty much on the opposite end of the spectrum of like shaming, especially like fat shaming. And one of the reasons why I want to cover it is because it's the same reason why, I want to dispel the myth that, fat shaming works. There's also this myth here that that is, that appears to be a response to like, healthy at all sizes, the fat acceptance movement or body positivity. It's like, well, if we accept these things, then that will somehow promote people to be more and more unhealthy. Or if we accept body positivity or health at any size, that will somehow encourage people to be unhealthy. Which I think the research doesn't say that. And I think the research says when it comes to self-acceptance, that actually when it comes to, generally speaking, positive behavior modifications, self-acceptance can and maybe should be a part of that. Where it might be counterintuitive, but if you accept who you currently are, I think, people push back on whatever body positivity and fat acceptance and health at any size is because, like, yeah, it's just like this really hyper-rational notion that, oh, well, if you accept these things, then there's just no room for change. But no, actually, these are not mutually exclusive. You can accept yourself and still be motivated to change, actually. Revolving Simp, welcome. Thanks so much for passing by. And if you are immune to shame, I mean, that's probably a good thing. I think I'm immune. I don't know that I've ever been fully tested, but I don't really, since I'm aware of these things, I generally know that if someone's trying to shame me, I generally know what their intentions are. And I'll kind of like not respond to that. I wish I just bought tires last night, 1800. Yeah, I hate adulting. Adulting is overrated. As much as I was complaining of not being an adult when I was a child, now I want to go back to being a child. Or I don't think I ever really grew up, and I don't consider myself an adult, at all. And yeah, adulting is totally over. But before we get into, some of the more serious or whatever, the main topics, I don't think any of these are like the most serious. But there's some, whatever. You can't make this stuff up, so to speak. I don't know if this falls into the realm of like science news, but I found the humor. This is a Canadian story, and it's almost like, yeah, like just whatever. It just seems like something out of whatever, The Onion, in terms of just like how ridiculous it just sounds on paper. Where yeah, iceberg lovers go wild over viral photos of the Dickieberg off Newfoundland's coast. Photographer Ken Pretty from the town of Dildo, no less, I think Dildo, Newfoundland is the town, captured aerial photos Thursday. And clearly the iceberg looks like a particular something. A man from Dildo, Newfoundland has captured the attention of iceberg lovers after photographing an oddly shaped hunk, now popularly known as the Dickieberg, on social media off the coast of Newfoundland. I'm getting a lot of response, a lot of reaction to the photo because of its resemblance to part of the male anatomy, chuckled drone photographer Ken Pretty. In an interview Friday, Pretty said he noticed from his very first photograph that the iceberg in an area of the province known as Conception Bay had online potential. The bird got its nickname from the term dicky bird, a Newfoundland euphemism for the male anatomy. Pictures of it on Facebook had garnered over 3,000 shares and a lot of comments by Friday morning. Pretty said, "Maybe I should call him," one user wrote. "Frozen stiff," remarked another. Pretty says he's lucky he got there when he did. Melting all the time, I mean, it might go limp. It's already shaping up to be a banner year for icebergs in Newfoundland and Labrador, with tourists and locals alike sharing their encounters online after a stretch of less than impressive season. Canadian Ice Service data shows over 200 icebergs off the coast of Newfoundland alone as of last week, with dozens more off the coast of Labrador making their way south. Onshore winds brought in both the pack ice and the bergs, said Diane Davis, who runs a Facebook group for iceberg hunters in the province. If the trend holds up, we should see them for May and June too. Mother Nature only gave us a handful last year. Anyone rushing off to see the dicky bird off Harbor Grace for themselves is in for a disappointment. Facebook users say the tip has fallen off. So, yeah. I almost thought this was like a meme headline when I first came across it. But like, yeah, this is like a real thing. So, you know, science can be a beautiful thing. And on the topic of science, or maybe supporting science, and maybe a reflection of the poor state of science in Canada. Although I don't think this is just, I don't think this is exclusive to Canada. I think there are major issues, whatever, the institutions of science in the developed world. At the very least, US and Canada. But yeah, in a couple of days, in Canada, there's a nationwide walkout for graduate students, postdoctoral scholars, because, like, yeah, I think as I've covered before, graduate students, postdocs, as someone who is still technically a graduate student, they are absolutely not fairly compensated. Technically less than minimum wage. Way less than minimum. But, you know, the excuse given or the justification given is like, yeah, you're students. It's okay to pay you less than minimum wage. And, you know, with inflation and the cost of living increasing more and more, just basically, you're essentially being paid less and less. Because very often, what you are paid as a graduate student or a postdoc, like, pretty locked in for a while. As in what I can say, for my department at my university, when I looked into what my department pays a graduate student, okay, and this is going back to like 2012 or 2011, when I was looking to start graduate school, or entertaining the idea of going to graduate school, the department guaranteed 17,500 Canadian. And it is still that same amount today, over 10 years later. And I think the cost of living has only increased. I know that they have increased tuition, etc., etc. So it's like, basically, over time, you have to attempt to survive on less and less. Unless the department ever actually chooses to increase what they pay the graduate student. Which, you know, no surprise. They virtually never increase what they pay their graduate students, at least in my department, and in most other academic departments that I've seen. But yeah, I'm just telling you that this is reflection. What I would say is a poor state of science. But on the topic of actual research, getting into the topics. So even though the workout streams are for now on hold, I still do plan to cover some, you know, health and fitness research. You know, if I can't do health and fitness, at least I can cover some health and fitness. So this was published. So this is an article about a study, I believe. But I'd say this backs up previous evidence where, I think most people are aware that there are guidelines when it comes to physical activity. Or whatever, X number of minutes of, moderate physical activity per week to, get the advantages of exercise. And I think many people assume that, you have to have kind of like strict, formalized, workout or physical activity sessions. But there's, I would say, more and more emerging research that, you can pretty much spread out your physical activity, across the day, or as they term it here, activity snacks, of just like, short bursts of physical activity spread out across your day. And you can still confer, or you can still have many of the advantages of being physically active. And, you don't need to have like these super intense, small workout sessions, as they sort of highlight here. A study finds that light intensity, 3-minute walks every half hour can help people with type 1 diabetes keep their blood sugar under control. So type 1, as opposed to type 2, type 1 is largely, if not exclusively, genetic. Used to be termed, I think, juvenile diabetes. Where it's like, yeah, essentially, this is not the one that's largely driven by lifestyle factors. Type 2 diabetes is the one that is largely driven by lifestyle factors. Being too sedentary is associated with the increased risk of serious diseases, and for people with type 1 diabetes, it makes controlling blood sugar levels more difficult. While exercise in general can be beneficial for people with type 1 diabetes, moderate and high-intensity exercise can also result in sudden, dangerous drops in blood sugar levels. Being sedentary for extended periods of time is considered to be unhealthy for anyone. It is of special concern for people with type 1 diabetes. It is associated with the dysregulation of insulin levels. Typically, type 1 diabetics, they are required to inject insulin to control their blood sugar. It's basically, if I remember, my basic biochemistry, it's like an insulin deficiency, as in like their body, as a result of basically type 1 diabetes is essentially an autoimmune condition of like, their immune system is destroying the cells that produce insulin. And so they need an insulin substitute, or they need to inject exogenous insulin because like they're not able to produce it themselves. So it's an insulin deficiency, generally speaking, as opposed to like type 2 diabetes. Generally speaking, it's like, an insulin insensitivity, or rather like their body is actually producing insulin, but due to certain, metabolic changes or physiological changes, like their body is no longer responding to the insulin that they're producing. It's not responding in, the typical way that you would expect. Yeah, for sure. Now, not only those injections, but, testing your blood sugar. That is also a thing. But I think now, I'm obviously not fully up to date on how type 1 diabetes or even type 2 diabetes is managed. But I think now there's actual kind of whatever insulin pumps that are, attached to you, that you don't need to manually inject yourself alone. It's just kind of like a thing attached to you that will kind of like auto-inject. That can also like monitor your blood sugar. Let me see if I actually look that up. I could be wrong. Yeah. So yeah, it's things like these. Where it's like literally the wonders of technology to a certain extent, or to a large extent. Are like, automated now. Yeah. The Omnipod Dash insulin management system. A tubeless, wireless, and waterproof insulin management system that provides continuous insulin delivery for 3 days, up to 72 hours. So like, yeah, Obviously, needs to be changed out, I'm sure. I don't know all the details of how it works. But like, yeah. Uh, kind of an auto-injector. Or at least, a temporary auto-injector, needs to be replaced. Which, I would say. I would assume it results in a pretty significant increase in quality of life. Where, you can kind of like sort of temporarily not have to worry or, have too much worry about, let's say, your blood sugars and, when to inject, etc., etc. I would think. Obviously, I don't know for sure. I would assume there are studies showing that these technologies, not only do they work in terms of controlling blood sugar, obviously, but maybe how they affect the quality of life of diabetics that have this. Yeah, so, I'm old enough where, like, this is a fairly recent development. Whereas, like, yeah, I definitely have known type 1 diabetics where, they had to, pretty much test their blood sugar, extract a drop of blood, multiple times a day, and then, yeah, inject themselves insulin multiple times a day. And, as someone who has, at one point, had to inject themselves once per week, that was enough for me. I can't really imagine doing that multiple times per day. I mean, I could do it obviously if I have to live. But like, yeah, even when I was at the point of injecting myself once per week, like, not a miserable experience, but not the most fun experience. And so I can imagine if I'm doing it like, 2, 3, 4 times a day. It's like, yeah, that's pretty significant, kind of like, not only physical burden, but psychological burden. Where was I? Yes. A new study from the University of Sunderland in the United Kingdom demonstrates a middle ground, a way for people with type 1 diabetes to keep their blood sugar under control with safe, short periods of light intensity. Oh. Yeah. I guess I can do that. Always funny. I mean, I'm sure I've asked a question before, but does anybody actually like take advantage of these things? I don't know. Maybe like, am I the outlier? Like, are just most Twitch streamers actually using these things? Curious. Yeah, the study finds that taking a 3-minute stroll after every 30 minutes of sedentary time helps study participants keep their blood sugar under control compared to people who were sedentary. In addition, the researchers found that the light walking breaks did not put the participants at risk of sudden drops in blood glucose levels. The researchers presented their recent findings at the Diabetes UK Professional Conference 2023, so in your neck of the woods, Bob Marley. They also published a review drawing similar conclusions in the Canadian Journal of Diabetes. Exercise snacks versus long stretches of sitting. The study involved 32 adults with type 1 diabetes, so, not the largest sample size, but not the smallest either. And consisted of 2 sessions conducted over a period of 2 weeks. So also, not the greatest time period. In the first, participants remained seated for 7 hours. In the second, they got up every 30 minutes for a light 3-minute walk. After each of the sessions, participants were outfitted with a continuous glucose monitor for 48 hours. So probably something similar to what I just showed in that Omnipod website. During that period, researchers requested that they adhere to their standard insulin prescriptions and levels of activity. They also all ate a standardized breakfast and lunch. The researchers found that after the short walks, individuals maintained a blood sugar average of 6.9 millimoles per liter. Their blood sugar levels were higher, 8.2 millimoles per liter after the extended sit-downs. Over 48 hours of monitoring, during and after the test period, the blood sugar levels remained in the target range by 14% higher in the participants who took exercise snacks compared to those who did not. So it seems like there was less of a blood sugar crash as a result of the exercise. Scrolling to maintain health. This study is interesting, commented Dr. Sumaira Ahmed, an assistant professor at the College of Osteopathic Medicine. I don't know if I trust osteopathic medicine. Who is not involved in the study. I've covered it before. I don't place a lot of faith in osteopaths. Just that I don't place any faith in chiropractors. It is exciting to recognize that even frequent low-intensity and very short-duration activities can help improve the time in range for people with type 1 diabetes. More importantly, it avoids hypoglycemia. Who fell for one of those? Really? I mean, whatever. I guess I can't be too harsh on anybody that falls for it. Whatever. I've technically been kind of like pranked on stream, or I've definitely fallen for traps from chatters, where they ask me a question, and they're clearly playing a joke on me that I don't clue in on. But I have not clicked on any, sketchy links. Dr. Ahmed also pointed out that the study's short strolls should be easy to incorporate into a person's daily routine. He also felt that the gentle impact of the exercise snacks would be unlikely to necessitate changes to their insulin doses or carbohydrate intake that might be required with more strenuous exercise. While the study's 7-hour sessions with 14 short walks are appropriate for a study trial, that is a lot of strolls for an average day, however. We need further study. Oh, Shai, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. I hope you're well. I hope you enjoyed. I think you took a walk today, if I remember correctly. And also, yeah, shout out to Shai. I could do this properly. I hope you're having a lovely weekend. It looks like, based off what I've seen, that the weather isn't so bad. Well then, so yeah, then you're a way better person, than I am. If you can, like, I can't even imagine just whatever, opening my eyes at 6 a.m. If you can also just, like, get out of bed, and go for a walk at 6 a.m., all the more power to you. That is like yeah, that's a level way above me. That's real adulting, getting up at 6 a.m. So I know that I can't do it. But it looks like it was enjoyable. And yeah, no surprise, your dogs are beautiful. Endocrinologist Dr. Anna Maria Ossel, who was also not involved in the study, noted, I usually tell my patients to go for a walk after meals. There are some studies that have shown a reduction in blood glucose of 10 milligrams per deciliter per block they walk, regardless of the intensity. As this study demonstrates, light intensity walks can keep blood sugar in range and are safer than walking at higher intensities. And whatever. I guess it's happy coincidence that we're kind of like talking about walking and the benefits of walking, at least from this study, the benefits of walking for type 1 diabetics, but there are benefits to walking for everyone. So that's further testament how much of a better person you are, because like I totally experience my body waking me up for no reason whatsoever, way before my alarm. And I'll usually, or pretty much I will, as in like actually just today, my body woke me up at like 6:45 a.m. So, and this is like a, whatever, 2 hours before my alarm. And I was like, no, I'm not getting out of bed. I'm just gonna like lie here until my alarm goes off. I did eventually fall back asleep, but I think I only got like an extra, whatever, 30 minutes to an hour. But I should, I probably should take your approach of like, hey, if your body wakes you up, you should just get up. You know, from what I've seen of the research, in terms of like sleep, you know, generally speaking, you know, you should get up when your body wakes up. As in, you know, I think the ideal scenario is like you shouldn't need an alarm to wake up. You'd have a schedule, and you know, you'd get sufficient sleep that your body naturally wakes up, and you should presumably wake up rested and refreshed and like ready to go. I'm definitely not there yet. Well, yeah, all the more power to you. 6:30 every morning. Like, I mean, I know that I should, you know, have that routine of getting up early. But I'm definitely not a morning person. And actually, I'm very strange, or like so, I don't know, so abnormal, where it's like for I think most people like, from what I can tell, at least of the conversations that I've had, most people like waking up to the sun. And like, you know, when it's morning time, they like, you know, they like the morning sun. I do not like the morning sun, like, at all. Like, even when I wake up in the morning, like, my blinds, my thick, heavy blinds, they are closed. And like, there's no sun hitting my eye until like, I don't know, 9 a.m., give or take. Where it's like, and this is only exclusive to morning sun. Like, I love sun in the afternoon. You know, when my body and brain is actually fully awake, like, I love being in the sun, and I like the summertime. But I don't know what it is, but for some reason, like, in the morning, like, I want nothing to do with it. And also, to be honest, my favorite time of day is like, you know, whatever, twilight, whatever, evening time. That in between of, like, you know, not fully night, pretty much. I don't know what that terminology is. But just where it's, you know, nice evening, especially in the summer, where, you know, it's not too dark, not too light. It's like a pretty nice twilight outside, I guess. Terminology. But in reality, who gives their body the right amount of rest? Yeah. I am chronically, at this point, sleep deprived. Now, nothing severe. You know, I do generally get at least a good, you know, 7 hours of sleep per night, which is like my bare minimum. But I know that, like, I can do better and should do better. And well, you're a student, Bob Marley. I know how it works. Well, I did mention Twilight, right? So not only do I like the Twilight time of day, whatever, I have watched those movies multiple times. A little bit of a guilty pleasure of mine, even though, like, there's lots of problems with those. And I recognize they're not good movies, in any sense of the word. But I don't know, for whatever, like, for me, they're just like, they're so bad that they're good type of thing. I was totally Team Jacob. Sure. Type 1 diabetes and exercise, caution necessary. Dr. Ahmad described the blood glucose response of people with type 1 diabetes to physical activity as highly variable, depending on the type, intensity, timing, and duration of exercise. So these individuals require either additional carbohydrate intake or require insulin dose adjustments before exercise started, she advised. Dr. Kossel also cautioned type 1 diabetics are particularly very sensitive to exercise. They have to always be careful when doing physical activity. Ideally, all type 1 diabetics should be on a continuous glucose monitor during exercise. So what happens in type 1 diabetes? Even though I think I covered this a little bit, but, well, it's always good to make sure that I have my facts correct. In type 1 diabetes, an individual's pancreas fails to produce an adequate amount of insulin. Like, yeah, pretty much. It's an insulin deficiency. Their body's not producing it. Because, like, yeah, the cells of the cells in the pancreas responsible for producing insulin are essentially being attacked by the immune system. Insulin hormone allows glucose or sugar to enter the body cells where it is used as fuel for energy. Without sufficient insulin, sugar becomes elevated in the bloodstream where it can build up to levels. I think most people are kind of like aware of these basics. So like, yeah. So even though, so yeah, this is about kind of like the activity snacks or short bursts of activity, and how it might be beneficial for those with type 1 diabetes and managing their blood sugar. So, you know, you can't use this to extrapolate of like, oh, this applies to me who doesn't have type 1 diabetes. But there's other research, which I'll probably cover on a future stream. Other research showing that, you know, short bursts of exercise are essentially like beneficial for virtually everyone, like the general population, not just like what they're talking about here with type 1 diabetics, where, you know, you don't need to set aside whatever 45 minutes, an hour to have, you know, your formal workout session. You can get a lot of benefits by just, you know, setting aside 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and it just adds up throughout the course of the day. So even though this was specific to type 1 diabetics, I think these activity snacks are, as far as I can tell from the research, are beneficial for the general population. So, on to the first main topic. Self-acceptance. So, I'm gonna go over this overview article. This is from Harvard Health Publishing, or from Harvard Medical School. This just gives like I think a pretty good broad overview of, as they say, greater self-acceptance improves emotional well-being. And then I'm going to cover a little bit of the research, the actual science, that, you know, what this article is kind of like referencing to, of like, hey, what is the actual evidence showing that greater self-acceptance is actually beneficial? And maybe specifically beneficial to your emotional well-being, and maybe beneficial in terms of like positive behavior modifications. Because like, yeah, this is kind of like a sort of a personal crusade of mine, like push back, you know, against shaming, against this notion that, you know, if you accept things, even things that are classified as unhealthy, that means people don't want to change these things. It's like, no, you can actually accept yourself and still be motivated to change. And if anything, that self-acceptance may cultivate even greater motivation to change. Self-acceptance is defined as an individual's acceptance of all of his or her attributes, positive or negative. Like, yeah, so I think, you know, the notion that, you know, we can't accept, for example, body positivity or health at any size, is because, you know, if you accept any negative, then it's like, yeah, well, then you're not going to change. But that is not, I don't think that's borne out in the research. And as they say here, it includes body acceptance, self-protection from negative criticism, and believing in one's capacities. Many people have low self-acceptance. There can be many reasons for this, but one widely accepted theory is that because we develop our self-esteem in part from others appreciating us. People with low self-acceptance may have had parents who lacked empathy during their childhood. Consequently, in their adult lives, they may need much stronger affirmation from others than most people do. In other words, ordinary levels of approval do not move the needle on their self-esteem. Like, yeah, even though I'm, let's say, promoting and covering the research self-acceptance, just as I covered the research on self-compassion, you know, I know, not only do I know from the research, you know, I kind of know from, you know, my own subjective personal experience that's, you know, always easier said than done. Of like, you know, as much as I might preach about self-compassion, I know that there are certainly times where I'm not the most compassionate towards myself. And, you know, I'm covering self-acceptance here, but that doesn't mean that, you know, I practice perfect self-acceptance, or that, you know, I go about it in the most optimal of ways. You know, pretty much easier said than done. Yeah, pretty much sort of pretty much my motto at this point. Of like, yeah, do as I say, not as I do. even the, I try to keep that in mind. I do try to balance things, but it's always a constant adjustment period. Where as I mentioned before during my workout streams, of like, hey, I'm prone to overtraining, and like I know, like I've literally covered the research on overtraining, like on stream. I know that it's not beneficial. Well, I know that it's detrimental to overtrain. I know what overtraining looks like. I recognize it when it occurs for me. And yet, like I am still prone to it. I can usually, correct pretty quickly. But I will totally be transparent that I have a hard time. Taking a day off from the gym. And I think I'm in a similar vein as you, Shy, in terms of like, as you make it very clear on your own stream, you work out for your mental health. I work out for my mental health. And it's just like, it's so part of who I am and kind of like my baseline level of functioning, that for me to not do it, like I don't feel like myself. Like it's pretty much almost habitual to me, like brushing my teeth. In many ways, actually, I look forward more to the gym than brushing my teeth. I'm like, yeah, I totally have to force myself into rest days, also, 1,000%. Up until recently, I was working out. Even for years and years, I was working out every single day, 7 days a week, every single day. Even though, like, I know better. And, thankfully, I've never been, like, seriously injured. But yeah, I know that it's, not a good thing. And yet I do it anyways. A little bit of self-sabotage. Totally. I can admit that. But even on the day, even when I was working out, every single day, like I do make an attempt to, like, not go full intensity, for every single workout session. And I even tried to, like, show that on stream, where it's like, when I was lifting, I don't think I ever performed any sort of like PR, on stream. Where most, pretty much, I think all my workout streams, I was using weight that was like pretty much like at most 80% of my max, if not generally more in like the 60 to 70%. So I do try to incorporate, lower intensity work, but even then, like that's difficult for me. And that also translates to like when I run. Like I love running. Not only just running on the treadmill, like I mentioned, you on stream, running away from my problems as well. And it's totally difficult for me to pace myself when running. It was totally exceptionally difficult for me to pace myself when I first started running. Where it's like, if I feel like I can go faster, I'll just like go faster. And even though like I know that I'm going to gas myself out, it's like, well, yeah, like if it doesn't feel intense, it just doesn't feel good to me, or just doesn't feel right. And so it's like, yeah, when I first started around the treadmill, it was like, oh, whatever, I feel like I can go faster, so I'll just like increase the intensity. Like I'm much better now. Like, before, I probably could not run more than like, 15-20 minutes at a time, because I would just like go super high intensity. Now I can't. I'm much better. Like, okay, this is the pace that I'm going to set. I'm like, I'll leave it. And like, I'm much better at like dialing it back. Yeah, totally. That is a part of it. Even though, I don't think it's an actual diagnosis. And I'm certainly not an addiction expert in any capacity whatsoever. But I'm in, let's say, digging into the research, and based off of, what other actual addiction experts say. I think you can arguably be addicted to anything, and I think exercise is a part of that. And I totally have to be mindful, I think, of having my exercise turn into like a full-blown addiction type of thing. Where, once it gets into that territory of like overtraining, and like whatever, if the injuries start racking up, then like, yeah, probably going in the territory of addiction. But, it just so happens that, the way our society is set up, that, being addicted to exercise is like, that's probably more celebrated than, looked down upon or shamed for. Which I'm definitely not saying that's how it should be. I'm just like describing how things are. Just like, being addicted, or, having a compulsion to just like overworking. I think that's also a thing. At least from my observation. Overworking, or having your entire life revolve around work, and being productive, I think is also a thing. And maybe at some point was a thing for me as well. But yeah, lots to unpack. So some people with low self-acceptance try to bolster it by accomplishing great things. Right, well, so they're also kind of like touching upon it here. Where I think there are multiple reasons as to why people overwork. And maybe one of them is like, yeah, what they're alluding to here. Of like, if you have low self-acceptance, then it's like, yeah, you want to maybe overcompensate or compensate for that by, accomplishing great things. But this only helps your self-esteem for a while. That's because achievement is a poor substitute for intimacy. In addition, these people are often under the impression that taking it when suffering is the main reflection of their value. It's hard for them to believe in genuine caring, and when it does come their way, they are suspicious of it. Of course, self-acceptance, or lack thereof, does not exist in a vacuum. It actually has profound effects on your physical and psychological health. For that reason, it is worth understanding what these effects are and what you can do about it. The emotional and physical consequences of low self-acceptance. Without self-acceptance, your psychological well-being can suffer, and often beneficial interventions are less helpful for you than for others with higher self-acceptance. For example, practicing mindfulness can help many people reduce the impact of stress, and I attempt to practice mindfulness. I do mindfulness meditation for 10 minutes, with an app, virtually every morning, or at the very least, 6 days a week. So, and whether I'm actually practicing mindfulness, I can't say. All I can say is I do my best to follow the instructions from the app, and whatever, pay attention to what the app, or what the voice on the app is telling me to pay attention to. Whether that actually cultivates mindfulness, I have no idea. I'm not even sure I know exactly what mindfulness is, or what it feels like. I know how largely it's described in terms of like being present in the moment. I know what all these words mean. And I understand them at a conceptual level. Do I actually know what the subjective experience of mindfulness is? I have no idea. And maybe this is my my faith side coming out. I'm just kind of like having faith that it's having some sort of benefit. But when you cannot accept yourself, it becomes less effective. Also, if you have a physical illness such as rheumatoid arthritis, which I have a somewhat similar or in the same category illness. Rheumatoid arthritis is, let's say, shares some similarities with Crohn's disease, which I have, especially when it comes to treatment. A lot of the treatments, rheumatoid arthritis, are used for growth. Because they are both inflammatory conditions. Not accepting yourself can make you more anxious about your body. In this context, your automatic negative thoughts increase. In addition, if you feel negatively about yourself, the brain regions that help you control emotions and stress have less gray matter than someone with a greater degree of self-acceptance. That is, these regions actually have less tissue to work with. This lack of gray matter may also appear in regions of the brainstem that process stress and anxiety. Stress signals from these latter regions in turn disrupt the emotional control regions, though poor self-acceptance may disrupt emotional controls in two ways. Directly by disrupting the brain regions that control it, and also indirectly by increasing stress signals in your brain that subsequently disrupt these regions. So it's kind of like a two-pronged, let's say, two things working against you, so to speak. But how to bolster your self-acceptance? There are three ways to increase self-acceptance: self-regulation, self-awareness, self-transcendence. And like, this is always, at least for me, whatever, tricky. Of like, I know, I understand conceptually self-awareness, but it's like, at least for me, the question becomes, how do you know you're self-aware? Does anybody, I think virtually everyone, as far as I can tell, like they identify themselves as self-aware. But as far as I can tell, like there's no like formalized test for self-awareness. I think we all, yeah. I sort of think of it like critical thinking of like who describes themselves as not a critical thinker. So it's like, and how do you know that you're a critical thinker? Again, as far as I can tell, there's no like test that you take that you get your stamp of approval that hey, you are a critical thinker, and that now you are also self-aware. So I'm always kind of like cautious about these things. Self-transcendence, let's say, that I'm more familiar with and kind of like have a better idea of what exactly that means, and the subjective experience of self-transcendence. Basically, I have greater confidence in terms of like my ability to self-transcend, my confidence in or being self-aware. Self-regulation involves suppressing negative emotions such as self-hatred, refocusing on the positive aspects of yourself, and reframing negative situations so that you see the opportunities in them. For example, looking for ways in which negative criticism can help you grow constitutes framing. However, self-control may be less powerful than we think. Lack of self-acceptance can deeply unconscious. That is, it can exist at a level beyond our conscious control. Also, when you do not accept or forgive yourself, you are still split from yourself. You do not feel it together. Both of these parts, the one that needs to forgive and the one that needs to be forgiven, are at odds with each other. In this situation, self-transcendence can be helpful. When you are self-transcended, you rely less on things outside of yourself to define you. Instead, you turn to an unforced sense of connectedness with the world. You can achieve this by contributing to work, family, or the community at large. The goal is to seek unity with some system in a way that is heartfelt and authentic. Any of the methods I've described in this post may also contribute to self-transcendence. Right. And I've covered a little bit, or at least I've certainly mentioned self-transcendence before on stream. Definitely when I covered spirituality and some of the research about spirituality. And what I would say is the importance of spirituality, even though I'm absolutely not a religious person. And I definitely don't advocate for any religion. And if anything, I heavily push back against religions. But as I mentioned before, I do identify myself as a spiritual person, without defining what exactly that means. And based off of the research, I recognize the importance of spirituality. And self-transcendence certainly appears to be a part of spirituality, or maybe arguably, self-transcendence and spirituality are kind of like synonymous. Fortunately, just like self-acceptance, self-transcendence also engenders physical changes in the brain. It has been associated with increased serotonin transporter availability in the brainstem. As mentioned earlier, this same region impacts self-acceptance. Transcendental meditation is another potential tool to consider for self-transcendence. It decreases cortisol and reduces your stress response. Oh, well, thank you. So have a great one, Shai. Have a lovely evening. Thank you so much for passing by. Always a pleasure. And take care and be well. Is spirituality really something you become based on? Well, so that's an excellent question. I mean, I think there are spiritual practices that you can incorporate. Whether that makes you a spiritual person, I guess is a separate question. But no, you know, yeah, I guess my answer would be, I think you can incorporate spiritual practices. Whether that actually means you're a spiritual person is a different story. Like, for example, I think a practice like this, a loving kindness meditation, is an actual thing. I think falls in the realm or in the category of a spiritual practice. And thus, I think ever that might push you towards being a spiritual person. And I think same thing with mindfulness meditation. And even you know, there are self-compassion meditations as well, or self-compassion practices, self-compassion mindfulness. I think these all fall in the vein or category spiritual practices. That, you know, there is research to back it up. And if anything, I might be covering some of these in a bit when it comes to self-acceptance, because they're kind of like self-acceptance practices. Or like, you know, they're whatever self-acceptance, you know, prescriptions, so to speak. They used to try to get us to do meditation, cool. Which is like, yeah. So, and I mean, I generally support that. You know, I think there's just more and more research coming out showing the benefits of multiple types of meditation. You know, mindfulness, I think, is the one that gets a lot of the popular attention. And I'm certainly not an expert on meditation. But there are various forms of meditation. Transcendental also being another one. And totally, if I remember correctly, even though generally speaking, there's a decent amount of literature showing that mindfulness meditation has benefits, multiple benefits. There appears to be a subset of people where like mindfulness meditation is like really not necessarily beneficial, but if anything, like the opposite. It's like these niche people should not be doing mindfulness meditation because it might be like actually increasing their anxiety or making things worse. That's like an outlier and an exception, but it is like something that, you know, you need to be aware of. That again, based off of the research that I've seen, like, yes, generally speaking, mindfulness meditation is beneficial for the vast majority of people, but there appears to be like a very small subset of people where, like, again, it might actually make things worse. Oh, P1 Fit, Travis, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. And also shout out to you once do this, where this is pretty perfect, since I think, yeah, for the month of May, you're doing a whole bunch of mental health awareness initiatives or like events. And I think also you're doing a fundraiser. Meditation is something I very much struggle with, trying to be more mindful. So yeah, totally. Like I'm not perfect at meditation at all. Like I'm good at like setting aside the 10 minutes. With the app that I use, and I make an effort, an attempt to like follow the instructions of the voice on the app. Whether I'm actually good at meditation, I have no idea. Like I wish, even though I don't know that I would actually want some sort of brain implant, but I wish there was some sort of like implant tracking, something in my brain saying, hey, you've passed the meditation. You did good. Because when I do my 10 minutes of meditation session in the morning, like, I don't feel like I'm doing good. I just kind of like power through it thing. I'm like, hey, I have the app open. I'm trying to listen to the voice. I'm trying to follow the instructions. But I have no idea whether I'm getting any sort of benefit, or that I'm like, whatever, passing the meditation test. Yeah, and I feel you, for sure. I have, for what it's worth, I have no doubt that it's gonna go well. It seems like you have a lot of great things and great talks lined up. And all I can say on my part is that I'm gonna do my best to tune in to everything. Yeah, I think we're on the same page. Where it's like, that is also my problem when it comes to a lot of these, psychological interventions. Like, it's not the same as like tracking your cholesterol. It's absolutely not the same as whatever, tracking, your triglycerides. You don't go to your doctor and be like, oh, you're out of the reference range. It's just like, it's supposed to be working. And hopefully it translates into, positive benefits in your life. But yeah, it does really seem to be just like, you gotta have faith that, hey, it's doing something. And that's why, like, I try to cover the research, because it's like, I'm a scientist, and, I'm bringing up faith, right, in terms of like faith that these things are like doing something beneficial. And this is just sort of my way of like, whatever, bolstering my faith, or at least trying to, show that it's not purely faith-based, but there is some evidence. But when it comes to like, actual benefits in your life, you gotta have faith that, hey, whatever invisible biomarker in your brain that it's supposed to be doing, that whatever is doing it. But yeah, meditation as a path to self-acceptance. Oh, I missed your comment about Marley. It never worked though, and someone would always... Well, yeah, I would imagine this is probably like grade school or high school. So I wouldn't expect kind of like teenagers or children to be the best at mindfulness meditation. Self-acceptance can also be achieved by two other kinds of meditation: mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation, right? Mindfulness attention to emotions involves not judging, which, easier said than done. But observing your emotions when they arise. This can lower your brain's emotional response to anxiety and distress. It effectively calms down your amygdala. Unlike, yeah, your amygdala, that is generally the threat center of your brain, or like the fear center of your brain. Having more compassion toward yourself appears to be helpful in increasing self-acceptance. Loving kindness meditation can help you achieve this state by changing the activity in regions of the brain that perceive and process emotions. For example, people previously numb to praise may be able to become more accepting of it. It is also associated with greater connectivity within the brain. This makes sense, as lack of self-acceptance has been associated with excessive right hemisphere activity in the brain. Loving kindness meditation provides a potential way to correct this imbalance. Yeah, I think they're touching upon something, in my mind, pretty important. As they allude to here, let's see, Yes. For example, people previously numb to praise may be able to become more accepting of it. So, like, totally, uh, um, whatever, way back in the day. Not an issue these days, thankfully. But like, yeah, there was totally a time that, like, yeah, praise or compliments, you know, I never responded negatively. Or, I never, like, invalidated what the other person said. Not that I was ever, like, whatever, showered with compliments or praise. But whatever, on the rare occasions that I would receive compliments or praise, you know, let's just say I probably wasn't the most receptive to it. But over time, I think I'm definitely not perfect, but I'm way more accepting of it. Even, well, actually, even just the story that I shared at the beginning of the stream of, like, this person that I know at the gym that I've known for actually quite a while at the gym. They gave me, they paid me a compliment in terms of, like, they saw me as a charismatic person. Like I said to them at the time, it's like, yeah, I thanked them for the kind words that they said and the kind sentiment. But I also shared that, like, yeah, I don't see myself that way, and I never would have labeled myself as charismatic. And, like, I'm just, like, sort of, like, curious as to, like, what does this person see that, in their brain it registers as charisma. Because, again, that is just, like, not on my radar at all. And so it's like, I think my reaction probably, like, whatever, way better today than, like, if that same scenario played out like 15, 20 years ago. I probably would not have thanked them for the kind words. I wouldn't have, like, gotten angry or upset. But it would just more have been like, I probably would just been more perplexed than anything. And kind of like, well, I don't know what you're talking about, a thing. These science streams will often give me flashbacks to my psychology classes. And you seem to have the same interests. Well, I'm hoping you enjoyed the psychology classes that you took. I'm hoping that I'll cover slightly different things. That's not going to be a perfect overlap with your psychology classes. And I'm actually a little bit surprised that your psychology classes went into such depth that at least I'll be doing a bit. And I'm pretty sure your psychology class did not cover optogenetics, and I think they definitely did not cover the paper that I'm going to cover about optogenetics. I'm pretty sure your professor, your psychology class, didn't even mention optogenetics. So I think I have something unique to bring. Find the ways to self-acceptance that work for you. Not all of these methods work for everyone. And while double-blind placebo-controlled trials remain the scientific gold standard to assess whether each intervention works, they are limited too. They tell us little about what will work for an individual. And an individual is, by definition, uniquely different from everyone, including study participants. So it is most important to do what works for you. Self-acceptance is key to a healthy emotional and psychological life. Start exploring what works for you today. Right. And I think they're bringing up, I think, an important point of, like, as they say, the randomized placebo-controlled trials, they are the gold standard. But, and certainly, that is generally speaking the evidence that we should go by. And, that's what should, let's say, guide, whatever, medical prescriptions, or prescriptions of medicine, and, psychological interventions, should be evidence-based, obviously. But, I think we always need to keep in mind, as they're saying here, randomized placebo-controlled trials, that's, generally speaking, kind of like, very specific conditions. And, very often the patient population is, carefully selected and screened. And, whatever, it's a certain demographic. It's kind of like a, somewhat picture-perfect conditions. And even though, that's the gold standard in terms of, like, evidence, that doesn't mean that, it translates directly to you and, how it will fit into your life. And also at the same time, when it comes to studies and statistics, just because a study says something, in terms of, like, whatever statistical benefit, that does not mean that is how it translates to you at an individual level. And I think that's something that's very often overlooked. And also, to be transparent, I'm probably not, haven't been the best in terms of, like, providing that caveat of, like, even in the studies that I cover, where it's like, hey, whatever, I cover health studies, of, like, whatever, this X amount of physical activity, results in a, whatever, 40% reduced chance of cancer. When it comes to, this sample that was studied in this research, that does not mean that, if you engage in the exact same practice that was included in the study, that you will get that exact same benefit of whatever percentage is reported. Basically, what happens at a population level, the stats that are reported at a population level in a study, it doesn't mean it translates to you directly at an individual level. Yeah, I'm hoping I covered that properly. Where it's like, yeah, we're talking about, stats, and, certain sample population, and, like, whatever benefits are found at a population level. It doesn't mean that that's how it translates to you directly at an individual level. We didn't do optogenetics, but we covered topics such as mindfulness and happiness, which, well, I'm actually glad to hear that. Actually, I didn't think that was a thing. Alright, so covering a little bit the research before diving into optogenetics. And I will almost certainly do multiple streams. Not almost certainly, basically certainty. That I will do multiple streams devoted to optogenetics. That is a very broad topic. And, there's a lot of detail and things to cover when it comes to optogenetics. This is the paper that I'm going to cover. It's in Nature Neuroscience. It's a technical report, so it's a technical paper. I'm not going to dissect it. I'm not gonna read it from beginning to end. I'm not going to translate or cover all these figures. One, because, like, I'm certainly not the most qualified. Translate all these figures, even though, like, I literally I covered this exact paper for a course. I did a whole presentation about this specific paper for a course, and I was the one that actually chose this paper to present for this course, because it is super cool. But I was mostly interested in, even though it's published in Nature Neuroscience, at the end of the day, it's a neuroscience paper. I was mostly interested in the biochemistry they carried out. Specifically, they carried out some protein engineering, and, optogenetics, or the technique of optogenetics. I think it's a really good example of, like, multiple fields and disciplines, or the intersection of multiple fields and disciplines, where, optogenetics, as of today, largely, a technique in neuroscience, although it's starting to branch out into other fields. But it developed as a technique through microbiology, through molecular biology, through biochemistry, and then through all of the groundwork that took place from all these disciplines, from microbiology, molecular biology, biochemistry. You have this technique, optogenetics, used, in neuroscience now largely, but has a lot of potential for, many uses in many fields and disciplines. So yeah, basically just a really good example of just like kind of like an overlap or the intersection of like multiple fields of science that results in this pretty powerful. And like, as I'll cover shortly, was like, given the stamp of like Technique of the Year by Nature magazine. It was like in 2010 or something like that, or like 2015. Before diving into that, gonna cover a little bit of the self-acceptance. I have 3 studies. I don't know if I'm gonna cover all 3 because I want to leave enough room to at least start getting into optogenetics. I'm probably not going to be able to cover all of the optogenetic stuff that I want to cover, that I planned covered, but I will absolutely visit it. Hoping to stream it tomorrow. So which one to start with? I think this one. I feel like it should be bigger. Whatever. So, I have 3 papers. One of this, effectiveness of acceptance and commitment therapy on weight, eating behaviors, and psychological outcomes, a systematic review and meta-analysis. So this is a meta-analysis published, this year, recent publication, in the Journal of Eating and Weight Disorders, Studies on Anorexia, Bulimia, and Obesity. I think this really highlights, basically, what happens in research, what happens in science, and the conclusions that science comes to, and in contrast to like public opinion, or it's like they're literally talking about, as they say in the title, acceptance and commitment therapy. And they're asking the question of like effectiveness of, and spoiler alert, this acceptance commitment therapy, ACT, could be effective in improving weight loss, but more studies are needed to ascertain its effectiveness and the underlying mechanism. So essentially, it appears to have some benefit. But as they say, not case closed. More studies, innovate. The more research, the better. But all of the current research, not all, but the majority of the research that we do have, the emerging research that we do have, this acceptance and commitment therapy appears to be effective. So, it looks like, at the very least, the science and the research is going in the direction of like, hey, acceptance and commitment therapy appears to have this positive benefit on those who are looking to, manage their weight or manage their eating behaviors. And yet, there's still this public opinion out there of like, no, we cannot accept, body positivity, or, health at any size. Because, if we accept these things, then, this somehow promotes being unhealthy. And yet, whatever in the research, the acceptance appears to have this positive benefit. Pretty much, the science is on the one end, with the evidence, and then you have public opinion, which is pretty much totally, clearly not evidence-based. It is just public opinion. And the public opinion is basically, if anything, detrimental. But we're going to start here, where self-acceptance mediates the relationship between mindfulness and perceived stress. So, what they're kind of alluding to here, they're, as I sort of alluded to before, mindfulness appears to have multiple benefits for a large proportion of people in terms of reducing anxiety, managing stress, and if I remember correctly, kind of like reducing your risk of depression. But then, like, what's the mechanism? Or the question becomes like, why does mindfulness appear to be having these positive benefits? Which is like, that is a totally valid and good question. Because the more we know about mechanisms, better. And this is kind of like really my biology, kind of like biochemistry stuff is coming out. Because mechanisms are important, especially when it comes to like chemistry and biology. Typically not enough to show that something is occurring, because the question always becomes like, well, why is it happening? Like, what exactly is going on? So, stress has been shown to be associated with a range of physical and mental health problems. One promising line of research indicates that mindfulness-based interventions are helpful in treating stress. Nevertheless, mindfulness-based therapies need improvement. Mindfulness can be defined as the awareness that arises through paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So it's like, yeah, this is how one of the definitions that they're putting forth as mindfulness. And yet, I know what this sentence is saying. And I know whatever, all of the words, the concepts. But do I actually know what being in the present moment means? Or rather, what that feels like? My answer is kind of like no. Even though, like I said, I'm someone that makes an attempt to practice mindfulness each and every day. But again, I don't know that I'm actually doing it successfully, or that I'm actually being in the present moment. Where if mindfulness is essentially being in the present moment, I have nothing in my brain that's like telling me or giving me the green light, like, hey, you're doing it, you're being in the present moment. The so-called third wave of cognitive behavioral therapies, including mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, so this is that ACT that other study was talking about, and dialectical behavior therapy, integrates mindfulness-related principles and strategies into treatments for a wide range of psychological problems across a wide range of populations. Many treatment studies have demonstrated these treatments lead to clinically significant reductions in psychological symptoms and improvements in perceived stress, as well as positive affect and subjective well-being. However, in order to develop more targeted and effective interventions, more work is needed to examine mechanisms by which mindfulness produces these beneficial effects. Right, so they're talking about mechanism, which I think is very often something, understandably, at least from what I could tell, not spoken about enough in psychology. It's just kind of like whatever. Associations and links. And not enough talk about mechanism. Well, okay, you're finding this association, then what exactly is going on? Or what is the mechanism of this proposed association? But, it's understandably way more difficult to tease out mechanism in psychology. Don't have, generally speaking, control of the variables. A growing body of evidence suggests mindfulness training leads to increased trait mindfulness. An increased trait mindfulness, in turn, is associated with decreased perceived stress. There is preliminary empirical work investigating mechanisms of mindfulness interventions. For review, the present study seeks to extend this line of research by proposing and exploring self-acceptance as another mechanism by which mindfulness-based interventions exert their beneficial effect on stress. Self-acceptance is defined as holding a positive regard for or attitude toward oneself as a whole, including one's past life experiences. Self-acceptance does not rely on the approval of others or personal achievements. Empirical evidence suggests self-acceptance is positively associated with subjective well-being. Moreover, Thompson and Waltz showed that mindfulness has a positive relationship with self-acceptance, and they also propose that mindfulness training is one way to cultivate self-acceptance. And this is... this is something that I'm kind of like grappling with somewhat recently, or like maybe in the past couple of years actually, as I've gotten deeper and deeper into my PhD. And totally, uh, I've had an evolution of my feelings and sentiments towards the PhD. Where it's like the deeper that I've gotten into it, the less value that I see in it, or at least I shouldn't say the less value, because most people just think of money. I should probably say more personal value. Of like, is this actually bringing any personal value to me? Whereas they say here, self-acceptance does not rely on the approval of others or personal achievement. And so, when I originally pursued the PhD, or I shouldn't say when I originally pursued graduate studies, as I started off as a master's student, I was like, hey, this is my passion. I enjoy science. I enjoy research. So like, hey, sign me up. This is what I'm passionate about. I've always been passionate about science. And so like, my original decision was driven by passion. And then, definitely some of that passion has, waned. Not because I no longer enjoy doing the science. Because like I still enjoy doing the science. I still enjoy learning. I'm covering science in my spare time. I think it's fair to say that the passion is there. But it's all of the other kind of like baggage associated. It's all the non-science stuff associated with doing science that like I don't like. And the culture of academia. Let's say certain not so nice actors. And let's say the academia that I know. Again, pretty much all of the things outside of the lab that I don't like. That have kind of whatever, chipped away at my passion for science. Basically the institutions, how the institutions operate. And so like, as I've gotten deeper into it, it's like, what am I doing this for? I originally started out of passion, and it's like, hey, I want to do research. And I also, I do want to contribute in a meaningful way to society, and, generating knowledge and discovering new things. Super cool, at least to me. But then, I think the reality is, at least, boots on the ground science. The way it operates at an institutional level, like, it's not really about that. Really not about, discovery. Not really about, good research and rigorous research. It's about publication. It's about, bolstering your CV. And like, well, as they kind of like alluding to here, it appears to be about personal achievement. And like that just does not resonate with me. And so that you're bringing up basically the question of like, do I just do it for the status symbol? Do I just do it, as proof that, hey, I get that stamp of approval of like, hey, you're a doctor of science. And like that doesn't motivate me. The cool letters is not motivating to me, or like having to prove myself is not motivating to me. At least for me personally at this stage in my life. Maybe it was when I was a teenager. But like I don't feel the need to like prove myself. or like to achieve like that stamp of approval of like, hey, you're a scientist in our books. And I've actually had this conversation with whatever, a certain other, I can't really mention who they are, but they're a person with a PhD, they're a person with a PhD, a postdoc, an MBA, and let's just say I know them professionally. So like they're a highly credentialed person, and they were essentially giving me like professional advice when I was like saying like, yeah, definitely my motivation to continue on the PhD or my passion for like the science has kind of like waned, and they pretty much like told me like, yeah, like you clearly have the knowledge, like, as they pretty much said, like, they view me as the equivalent of a PhD. And so it's like, the way they framed it, it's like, hey, you are pretty much like doing it at this point to like show your membership card. Like, hey, I'm a member too. Because, you know, as they say, or as they said, and as you're kind of like bringing up Bob Marley, if you don't have those 3 letters next to your name, you know, of other experts won't recognize your expertise. And so it's like, you know, if I'm just doing it for the membership card, like maybe that's enough motivation for other people. But that does not appear to be enough motivation for me. Where it's like I really don't feel like I need to like, you know, put my membership card. And like totally, like I've asked myself the question, maybe I'm being arrogant. Where it's like, you know, hey, until you actually like do it and prove it, like, you know, kind of like put up or shut up. Then don't say that you would ever have the equivalent of someone else with those 3 letters. But you know, I've trained enough people and interacted with enough people with those fancy letters that, like, you know, I recognize that they have their limitations. That they are definitely not a guarantee of any sort of like expertise, for sure. And they also draw upon a little bit of my personal training experience of like, yeah, you know, being certified as a personal trainer. Like, that looks good. That's something that you can market, and it is generally a good thing. Be certified as a personal trainer. And, you know, I would generally, you know, I would give the advice to anyone looking for a trainer that they look for someone who's certified. But also at the same time, I would like call attention that just because they're certified doesn't mean that they're absolutely a good trainer. And, you know, someone can be certified and be a bad trainer. And not all the certifications are equivalent. And, you know, especially with personal training, it's a large, pretty much it is an unregulated industry. And so, like, you know, someone can really largely just pay for, like, you know, the easiest certification just to call themselves certified personal trainer. Absolutely. Not that, you know, I don't want to like judge them on that one, you know, one little micro event, but, you know, there's multiple things that, like, it could just be they could have just had a bad day, right, as we all do. So I don't necessarily want to judge someone on what might have been, like, you know, just one of their worst moments or a bad moment for them, you know, just a perfect storm of bad luck. Who knows? But like, yeah, like that is alarming. Where it's like, yeah, there were lots of things to flag there. And so it's like, yeah, you know, these certifications, just so, yeah, I obviously have a lot of thoughts, and I'm going on a tangent. But let's just say, you know, if I show you the academia that I know, you know, I've I've contemplated showing this picture on stream. I'd have to blur out some faces, but I literally have a picture of like a faculty member. You know, this is at one of my colleagues' PhD comprehensive exam. Basically for them to become a PhD candidate. This is like pretty much done in like the first 1 or 2 years of the PhD. Like, hey, it's basically an oral exam. And this is kind of like the deciding event or exam in terms of like whether you will continue on the PhD, or it's like, hey, there's some serious flaws with what you are attempting to do, or like how you're going about doing it. We need to either like pause, or like maybe really, this is exceptionally rare, but or maybe worst case scenario, kicked out of the program. But that is exceptionally rare. You have multiple attempts at the comprehensive exam. I think I only know of ever like one person who like whatever, pretty much absolutely bombed their comprehensive exam. But like, yeah, you know, a colleague of mine was, so they do a presentation in front of faculty members, multiple faculty members, termed their examination committee, and their job really is to like grill them and, you know, administer an oral exam after my colleague was supposed to be after my colleague gave a presentation like, hey, this is my research, this is what I propose to do. It's also called the research proposal, because it is basically, you're supposed to outline your experimental plan for the next, you know, 3, 4 years, 5 years, or whatever your tentative timeline is. And so since they were my colleague, I attended their comprehensive exam. And so let's say, you know, I was there in the small audience with their examination committee. And like one of the faculty during, like in the middle of my colleague like presenting, you know, her proposal, what she wants to do, like this faculty member like fell asleep, like head down, eyes closed, passed out. And I took a picture of it, where it's like they're clearly asleep. You're not paying attention to what my colleague is saying. And this is one of their examiners. Like literally, it was their job to administer their oral exam. And like, you know, they eventually woke up, and they just like threw out like a random like question. And it's like, you know, what are you doing? That really, I'm always on attention. That's kind of like the academia. That's like a hint of the academia that I know. But yeah, onwards and upwards. Empirical studies have shown mindfulness-based intervention not only decrease stress, but also increase self-acceptance and self-compassion. Corroborating these findings, Hollis Walker and Alismo found that self-compassion mediated the relationship between mindfulness and subjective well-being. This other research group found that self-acceptance mediated the relationship between trait mindfulness and depressive symptoms. According to their model, higher mindfulness was associated with higher positive emotions and self-acceptance, which have protective effects in preventing depressive symptoms. And I've obviously, so in addition to them talking about self-acceptance, they're also talking about self-compassion, which I have covered before, I think at least one time, if not multiple times. And so it's like, yeah, you know, a lot of these things, you know, understandably overlap in terms of self-acceptance and self-compassion. You know, what is the exact difference between, you know, self-acceptance and self-compassion? I can recognize them as distinct, but I think there is some clear overlap in terms of like, you know, I think you can make the argument that, you know, if you are not, if you don't accept yourself, you are arguably not being compassionate towards yourself. Just as, you know, in order to be compassionate towards yourself, you arguably should accept yourself. An exploration of the potential mediating role of self-acceptance in the relationship between mindfulness and stress is important for several reasons. First, Although previous research has demonstrated that self-acceptance mediates the relationship between mindfulness and peace of mind, a positive mental health outcome, self-acceptance has not been examined in the context of the stress, a mental health problem. Second, a better understanding of specific mechanisms enable the development of brief targeted interventions for stress. Loving kindness meditations and programs such as mindful self-compassion have been shown to enhance self-acceptance and can promote beneficial effects within as little as 3 weeks of practice, which makes these approaches potentially more feasible and generalizable than comprehensive mindfulness treatments, which tend to take at least 8 weeks of intensive practice to promote lasting effects. Third, this investigation contributes to the larger literature investigating mindfulness mechanisms. If successful, if self-acceptance is shown to play a mediating role in the effect of mindfulness on perceived stress, this study will serve as a foundation for future studies to explore the relative effect of all proposed mechanisms of mindfulness simultaneously. This line of research can ultimately elucidate for whom and in what circumstances different aspects of mindfulness are effective in addressing the problem of perceived stress. Like, yeah, they are really trying to tease out mechanisms, and it seems like, they're trying to show something for the first time in terms of, like, is some of the positive benefits of mindfulness, is self-acceptance part of, that driving force, driving those positive benefits. The possible mediating role of self-acceptance in the relationship between mindfulness and perceived stress also has important theoretical implications. Mindfulness can be conceptualized in numerous ways, but most mindfulness scales aim to measure, and mindfulness interventions aim to enhance both the attentional, for example, observing the present moment, acting with awareness, and attitudinal, that is, non-judging of inner experience and non-reactivity to inner experience, facets of mindfulness. However, non-judgment, non-reactivity, non-striving, and curiosity, attitudinal facets of mindfulness, are not by nature self-acceptance. Improvements in one's awareness of and non-judgmental orientation toward experiences in the present moment, for example, external events or internal thoughts, emotions, and body sensations, do not necessarily extend to acceptance of the self as a whole. For example, it is possible to remove judgments of one's experience in a moment, but still remain non-accepting of the self in a more global sense. Although most researchers and clinicians would agree that self-acceptance is a desired outcome of mindfulness, along with related constructs such as self-compassion and peace of mind, there is more controversy surrounding the question of whether self-acceptance is also a mechanism by which mindfulness exerts its effects on interpersonal, behavioral, cognitive, and emotional domains of functioning. This study was designed to extend previous research concerning the mechanisms of actions underlying mindfulness. That is why some individuals seem to benefit more from mindfulness-based interventions targeting stress. A mediation model is proposed. Self-acceptance would either partially or fully mediate the relationship between mindfulness and perceived stress. This study makes an important and unique contribution to the literature because no study has explicitly examined the role of self-acceptance as a mechanism involved in the mindfulness-stress relationship. So their hypothesis, with self-acceptance controlled, mindfulness will still account for variance in perceived stress. So it's like, pretty much mentioned it multiple times, but they're really trying to tease out the mechanism of like, hey, mindfulness appears to have this beneficial effect on one's ability to cope or deal with stress. So what is going on there? Essentially, does self-acceptance basically put you in a better position to deal or cope with stress? That's essentially the primary question I'm trying to answer. I'm not going to dissect the methodology, but they are looking at a particular region. So this is students from university in Beijing, China. So something to keep in mind. May not be, you might not be able to extrapolate, every other region. Might be unique university students in Beijing, China. And yeah, they have their particular measure of mindfulness, etc., etc. Self-acceptance questionnaire. Essentially, a lot of this is essentially done, through self-report and questionnaire. This is not a neuroscience study. There's a little bit of a caveat there. Not that all neuroscience is perfect, definitely not. But essentially, they are not measuring things at the level of the brain. So what are the overall main findings? So they go through kind of their model here. Figure 1, self-acceptance partially mediates the relationship between mindfulness and stress. Values near arrows represent standardized beta coefficients. Value within parentheses. So, yeah. Self-acceptance, as they say, partially mediates the relationship between mindfulness and stress. So it appears to play a part in the mechanism. In mindfulness's ability to manage or cope with stress. The purpose of the present study was to examine the role of self-acceptance in the relationship between trait mindfulness and perceived stress among a sample of 132 students from Beijing, China. As predicted, mindfulness and self-acceptance were both independently negatively associated with perceived stress. So it's even though hopefully intuitive to most people, but understandably if it's not, the greater the mindfulness, greater the self-acceptance, you perceive less stress. Based on the Barron and Kenny method of mediation, results of the present study suggest that self-acceptance partially mediates the relationship between mindfulness and stress. So the theoretical implications. Wrapping up this paper. I think I'm going to wrap up this paper and then get right into optogenetics part. I have multiple papers. You want to make sure that I actually cover the main topics in my stream. So I'm probably going to revisit the rest. Acceptance. Hopefully on tomorrow's stream. So recent research has focused on understanding the mechanism of mindfulness that account for the benefits of practicing mindfulness meditation and increasing trait mindfulness. The conceptual body of research suggests that mindfulness reduces stress and depression through meeting variables such as cognitive flexibility, values clarification, enhanced attention, and acceptance of experience. Yeah, I do plan to stream again tomorrow. I can't guarantee or promise it. That is my plan. I do have streams to make up for. I recognize that I was absent for I think at least 2, if not 3 weeks. Which was not part of my plan. So I am trying to make up for that. And like I said, ideally I want at least 2 science streams per week. For the time being. Ideally 3. I could technically stream on Monday evenings. But Monday evenings are typically when I do Prime panels. Oh, and Eric, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. I hope you're well. And are you a scientist or a science lover? Both are valid answers. Or you could also be a science hater. Also a valid answer as well. No judgment on my part. But thank you for passing by. But yeah, I'm typically and thankfully invited to Prime's panels on Monday evenings. And so I kind of have that time reserved. I can technically stop going on Prime panels and just do my own science stream. But I do kind of feel a sense of loyalty to Prime, since he invites me on panels. And he has allowed me to grow my audience and get myself up there. So I don't know if I'm going to stop going on Prime Path just yet. Ooh, rehab. Oh, so I do cover. So rehab specialist. I'm assuming, you know, physical. May I ask, like, physical rehab, or substance rehab would be the appropriate term. Or if you don't want to share, also valid. Okay, cool. Oh, super cool. Well, welcome. Happy to have you here. Ooh, okay. Well, I do cover, so I definitely, there might be some overlap in terms of, like, cognition, because I do cover psychological research. I don't think I don't think I've ever covered anything specific to cognition. But I'm definitely aware of the concept of cognition. Sure. But yeah, that's super cool. Empirical studies suggest, and, you know, once I'm done covering this study, we're going to get into some neuroscience. I'm going to try to give a brief primer on optogenetics. Empirical studies suggest enhanced positive emotional regulation strategy, decreased rumination, and experiential avoidance are the mechanisms associated with symptom reduction, as well as the enhancement of positive emotions. The present study extends this line of research and fills an important gap in the literature by explicitly investigating whether self-acceptance is an essential component of mindfulness. And, like, yeah, right now we're covering this paper on self-acceptance. And what I would say is, you know, the importance of self-acceptance, or how self-acceptance in combination with, let's say, mindfulness can maybe put you in a better position, you know, deal with stress, or maybe anxiety, and maybe a whole host of other things. This type of research sets the foundation for comparative studies, exploring the relative effects of different mechanisms and promoting benefits of mindfulness interventions, which can ultimately reveal when and for whom mindfulness interventions, which can ultimately, meaning that different aspects of mindfulness are effective in addressing specific, targeted problems of clinical relevance. By identifying specific processes linked to specific clinical outcomes, researchers can tailor mindfulness-based interventions to efficiently address the particular problems of individual clients. What are the clinical implications? One clinical implication of the present findings is that clinicians can directly and explicitly target self-acceptance or self-compassion in mindfulness-based treatments in order to enhance the beneficial effect of mindfulness-based interventions on stress reduction. It could be that enhancing mindfulness without first or simultaneously increasing self-acceptance would diminish the beneficial effects of mindfulness on stress. Loving kindness meditation is an example of such an approach. It has been found to enhance non-judgment, non-reactivity in mindfulness-based interventions. Similarly, the fundamental dialectic in dialectical behavioral therapy is that of acceptance and change, which entails patients accepting themselves as they are in the moment while simultaneously working to change. I think this is, at least in my mind, you know, pretty key. You know, this is something at least that I want to emphasize, because I think many people, okay, this is why, you know, I cover a lot of the research on shame, especially like fat shaming, or like shaming anybody for their behaviors, and why I push back strongly against it. And again, going back to like body acceptance, body positivity, and many people reacting, or, you know, pushing back against the concepts and movements. It's because, like, I think many people are under the false assumption that, like, hey, accepting yourself as you are means that you won't change, that you are kind of like resigned to your fate. I think many people have that kind of like opinion, not grounded in evidence. They're just going by like whatever. It intuitively makes sense to them. Well, if you accept you should think the overall cognitive process is like, well, you know, in order to change, you have to not accept yourself, because that only makes sense to them. You can only change if you don't accept your current circumstances, or if you don't accept who you are now. In that accepting who you are now is not compatible with change. And as they're kind of like, explicitly saying here, you can accept yourself, and that can be part of change. And, these things are not mutually exclusive. You can accept yourself. And if anything, arguably, accepting yourself may be an important component to working towards change. Previous research suggests that mindfulness interventions that teach attention or acting with awareness skills without also emphasizing how to pay attention, that is, non-judgmentally, may cause more harm than good. Accordingly, therapists now understand the importance of emphasizing both the attentional and attitudinal aspects of mindfulness. Similarly, findings from the present study suggest that therapists can intentionally and explicitly help patients be mindful of whether a lack of self-acceptance is interfering with their efforts to attend to their experiences in the present moment, and to do so in a way that is characterized by non-judgment and non-reactivity. So, wrapping up this study, limitations. Several limitations of the present study, and it's always good to keep in mind limitations. As I sort of highlighted, the sample that they used was university students at a university in Beijing, China. So, very specific demographic. It may not be extrapolatable to the general population. So yeah, several limitations of the present study, most of them sample related, just areas for improvement and future research. First, the present study included a relatively small and homogeneous sample of volunteer participants. Yeah, college students. So generalizations beyond the population sampled in this study should be made tentatively until such time as they can be replicated in a larger, more diverse sample, using randomization methods and among clinical populations. Right, pretty much just what I said. Furthermore, the present study should be replicated in other cultural contexts. These researchers found that conceptualizations of mindfulness differ across cultures and can influence patterns of responding to self-report mindfulness scales, right? Because, they gave kind of like their specific definition of mindfulness, which I think is kind of like definition of whatever mindfulness researchers at large, which is like mindfulness is essentially, being in the present moment, non-judgmentally, whatever that means. But it's totally possible, as they're alluding to here, that different cultures have a totally different conception of mindfulness or being in the present moment. Specifically, compared to their American counterparts, participants seem to view mindfulness as a more dynamic and holistic construct, without clear distinctions between acting with awareness and accepting without judgment. In order to demonstrate causality in this model, randomized clinical trials should be conducted to examine whether self-acceptance enhances mindfulness-based interventions for stress and anxiety, or whether self-acceptance serves as a protective factor against stress in mindfulness-based interventions, such as mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. Finally, emerging research suggests most traits demonstrate intra-individual variability across time. So it's like even the traits within the same person can vary across time. Even though I think most people view like their personality or who they are as an adult pretty fixed, but that's not necessarily the case. The brain is pretty plastic, and I don't think there's really all that much that is like truly cemented in who you are as a person. But that is just totally my opinion. But regardless, I do think overall, it's better to think that you can change than it is to just think that you can't. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Wow, Monty, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. It's definitely been a minute. Always happy to see you. Chances are not thinking about how shitty you are leads to bad. Absolutely. But hey, like, at least, easier said than done, in my opinion. Right? Even though, I'm talking about self-acceptance. And I'll preach about it, and I recognize it as a good thing. I'm not going to sit here and pretend Like, you know, I perfectly accept myself, and I know exactly how to, you know, practice self-acceptance. Easier said than done. And also, you know, even though you might be retired, you still deserve a shout out. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're enjoying the nicer weather. I think winter is officially over in Montreal, but I probably shouldn't have said anything. Where was I? Yes, accordingly, research using long-term, longitudinal, or ecological momentary assessment methods are needed to examine the effect of naturally occurring within-person fluctuations in mindfulness and self-acceptance on perceived stress and psychological well-being. The current study contributes to the recent body of literature that attempts to understand the mechanisms of mindfulness that partially account for the beneficial effects of mindfulness-based interventions and the practice of mindfulness meditation. The present findings corroborate previous research that suggests higher trait mindfulness is associated with increased self-acceptance and decreased psychological distress. Results from the mediation model explored in this study provide preliminary empirical evidence supporting the theory that self-acceptance is an important mechanism underlying the negative correlation between mindfulness and perceived stress. And kind of like the more mindfulness that you are, you know, the better you are able to like cope or deal or manage with stress. And it seems like, as they're saying here, there's some evidence to show that it's like, you know, mindfulness's effect on self-acceptance is sort of like mediating that is the mechanism on that perceived stress. 100%. Absolutely. But I've arrived. Yeah. I also totally take your point there. Of like, you know, we're all on our own personal journey, myself included. You know, I can totally wish that I had learned these things earlier, like whatever, literally like 30 years ago. But better late than never. And maybe I should clarify, did you want to talk like now or set up one? Either or, like, works for me. It's up to you. But totally, I would be up for a Discord talk. More or less, like, whenever you want. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. But yeah, I think this is pretty... So, this is, as they sort of, like, say here, in this study. This is, like, one of the first... appears to be one of the first studies to show that, you know, this self-acceptance is part of that component of mindfulness. I believe that... let me double check. I am still in your Discord server. And I believe I see you. Should I join? Got it. One moment.
Hey, there he is.
Hey, are you able to hear me? And
yes. Hold on. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, great. You know what? It's funny you're talking about this, because this has been the theme of my life for the last few months.
Hopefully that you say that positively.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just I mean, it's been the theme. It's funny when I had content, I used to have this clip, right, about after the doctor was like the doctor told me when he's like, okay, well, before I can prescribe you a ADHD medicine, right, you have to go see a psychologist and cure your depression. I'm like, cure my depression? What the fuck? Like, that's a tall order.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you have to climb Mount Everest.
Yeah, thanks. No. So I had a clip. I was like, oh yeah, my doctor told me, cure your depression. Well, I'm like, watch this, motherfucker. Right? But I mean, I'll do it in 6 weeks, right? I didn't do it in 6 weeks, but you know what? I did it.
Well, congratulations.
I did it.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, no. No, but anyway, so what you're talking about, self-acceptance. I mean, I guess I had a massive problem of just falling into these patterns where my inner voice was just like, "Oh, you should have done this. You should have done this. Oh, you're so stupid." Right? Oh,
100%.
you know, I know I'm not stupid, but it's just like, but yeah, just the inner voice are like, oh, you made a mistake here, dummy, right? Or
100%.
just this negative voice, right? And so that's it. So it's been a lot of work for like, or a lot of work. It's been a lot of like, yeah, internal work, I guess. To that voice is gone now for me, right? And maybe it pops up once in a while, but for the most part, you know, I've learned to well, basically accept that, you know, you did things wrong. There's nothing you can do about it, and that's okay. You're human, right?
Yeah,
You're human, and humans make mistakes, and just it's okay, because and this is the big takeaway for me. I'd waste a lot of time mentally, right? And so it's taking away like fucking bandwidth from things I should be doing mentally, just reminding myself how shitty I am, right? And I'm like,
absolutely.
okay, just hours and days and months and years, okay, of this, okay, is just not good. But then again, if you think about it this way, think about the time you're wasting, right? Think about the time you're wasting just thinking about how shitty you are. Not only is it bad to be told how shitty you are by yourself, right? But you waste hours doing it. And I'm like, hours out of the day, and it just amounts to a bunch of stuff. And just like stopping telling yourself how shitty you are. I mean, I know it's you can't just stop. I know that, but
I know you're not saying that.
Think about it. Just the sheer amount of time you save is a huge boost in your life.
Yeah, and also I think you brought up in my mind a pretty important concept. It also like frees up a lot of, you know, bandwidth in your brain.
Mental bandwidth, yeah.
100%. Like,
exactly.
I think when you're, again, easier said than done, but I think, you know, that harsh inner critic.
Yeah. No.
You know,
there's a reason. There's a reason you have that. You have some childhood like trauma or something. Something fucked you up to the point where you're like, the way you've learned to cope with it is to just remind yourself how shitty you are preemptively. Right?
Yeah, well,
or something.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for sharing. So if I may ask, and like this, I mean, this is really important. In terms of, so you say it doesn't happen, or like it's gone, as in like, you know, like literally, like if you're able to say, or you want to say like those thoughts don't occur, or you're just like so good at catching yourself about to engage in that you can stop it in its tracks, type of thing, or both.
Both. Absolutely both, because there's still times, and because it's like, okay, I get the general concept of it, right? And so day to day, all the time, I just don't waste time reminding myself how shitty I am, right? In fact, I have pretty nice things to say about myself now over time, right? But sometimes when I get into emotionally charged or overwhelming situations, that voice creeps up again, right?
Absolutely.
And in those occasions, I'm much better at catching myself.
Okay, good.
And now it's like, oh, it's a warning symbol. It's a warning sign. It's like, or not a warning sign, but it's like your body, your physiology, right?
And
is falling into this same pattern, right? Your nerves are telling you the same thing as you used to do to cope with emotionally overwhelming situations, right? And something triggered it. And so I'm better at catching myself and saying, you know what? Why am I this level of upset again? What am I really mad at? I need to stop not facing whatever this was, because now it's just turned into a pattern that I use to avoid a certain thing, right? But this situation has triggered some emotionally overwhelming like response. And I'm just like, why? What are you really mad at? Like, what's your insecurity? What are you afraid is going to happen?
Yeah, what's the actual like underlying thing that is like driving this like sort of pattern or past pattern that now you're aware of. So yeah, I mean that's great, and it sounds like so do you actually, was there some like specific sort of like practice that implement, like actual like mindfulness meditation, or like some sort of like
Um,
structured program that you had to follow?
well, at first it was just the mental transition to. I do a bunch of stuff now for my own well-being, right?
Mhm.
But it's more. I do more and more of the things because I realize that I'm a lot better at. I'm a lot better at catching or sorry, I'm a lot more responsive to my emotional state, not my emotions, but my emotional state, right? And managing it and figuring out like, okay, so basically your subconscious, your body's trying to tell you something right now. Okay, what is it? And also I'm not trying to deny myself that emotion either. It's just that's the other thing. It's like people think it's like avoiding emotions or suppressing emotions, but no, it's like you have the emotion, right? You condition yourself to not deal with it in a violent or not violent, but aggressive or just disruptive way.
Yeah, or like an unhealthy way.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. But also, it's like, so you've conditioned, but the only reason you condition yourself or you allow yourself to let that thing not get to you is because you know that you've made a promise to yourself that I will deal with it when I'm not feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah,
I think that's something. It's like because we frequently fall into these patterns to get away from a situation, right? And that's what we're doing. We get
1000%.
away from the situation.
Yeah,
You get away from the situation. You're somebody okay, but then you don't because you want to get away from it. Why would you go revisit it? It's fucking ridiculous. Right?
yeah,
But unfortunately, facing difficult stuff in our life is a skill that we need to practice ourselves at, or we need to train with, and you need to make it a point to deal with the difficult stuff that overwhelmed you in the first place, but also to not deal with it at a time where you're emotionally overwhelmed by it.
but yeah,
You know?
when you're ready, or like you feel like you're in that, I think I think you
Yeah.
touch upon something super important.
Yeah.
Of like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of us, myself included at one point, are kind of like conditioned to like, avoid discomfort, or like, if your body or your feelings are telling you something, just kind of like, ignore it and like push on. Just
Yeah,
like,
and push through. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
uh,
push through. Oh, just to go with it. That's a lot of our conditioning, I guess, growing up, right? Because
100%.
that's something that oh, you want to cry about it or you want to feel it. That's fine. Just push through, get it done, and to a certain extent, I mean, I understand that, but that's like crisis thinking. That's what that is, right?
Yeah,
It's like I'm trying to solve a problem. There's a tight deadline. It's a fucking crisis. At which point, yeah, shut the fuck up about your feelings and get this job done is actually the strategy even I would recommend. But we're not in a fucking crisis situation all the goddamn time, right?
yeah.
Yeah, go on.
I think you touch upon again something like super important. Sorry to cut you off, but like, yeah, I totally
Yeah.
agree with you. Of like, there's totally a time and place for like pushing through, especially as you say, like if you're in crisis management, there's totally a time and place of just like, hey, setting your emotions aside and dealing with the task at hand, or the situation at hand, or crisis at hand. But like, yeah, I think at some point, you probably do need to revisit like those feelings and process them.
I think it's imperative. It's imperative that you revisit them because that's the balance.
Mhm. Yeah,
It allows you to avoid the emotions, okay, when they're going to get you into more trouble that you're going to regret later, okay? But the cost of avoiding that in a way that's healthy is that you have to face those things, right?
yeah,
You have to. It's like the yin and everything healthy. Everything healthy is a balance. You have to oscillate between two states, right? It's the yin and yang of things.
100%.
But that's it. Just like when you're working out, right? What are you doing? You're traumatizing your muscles to a certain extent. And a lot of people say, oh, okay, well, I'm building my muscles when I'm training. It's like, no, you're destroying your muscles when
Yeah,
you're training. You're
it's
building
the
your muscles when
recovery.
you're resting.
Yeah,
The recovery is like the important part. Like one fuels the other, but you have to oscillate between the two modes for any of it to mean anything.
yeah, 100%. Like, I love the analogy as well, because like obviously, the fitness and workout analogies is right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
why I picked it for you. There's so many. No, but there's so many examples where you can see this, right? This kind of oscillation between two states, right? That are contrary to each other, but also complement each other. You know?
Yeah, or they work like in concert to like hopefully
Yeah,
for
exactly.
you to thrive and really hopefully live a fulfilling and good life. Where it's like yeah that analogy of like working out and like you are, as you say, you're stressing your muscles as you're working out, and it's a balancing act. And even though like I'm aware of this, I'm heavily aware of this, and this is also like something I was just sharing this earlier on stream. Like I struggle like with overtraining. It's difficult for me
Mm-hmm.
to not train, to like
Mm-hmm.
just to stop stressing my muscles, even though I actively know better of like, hey, progress, the muscle building and
Mm-hmm.
the progress, it's outside of the gym. It's recovery, it's
Mm-hmm.
rest, it's fueling your body appropriately with hopefully nutritious
Mm-hmm.
foods. But I totally struggle with like, hey,
Really?
yeah, 100%.
Like you don't take enough resting. Like what is it? Like is basically you won't go a day without a workout or something?
Yeah, like it's totally
Yeah.
it's difficult. I
Yeah.
have to kind of like force myself to like take a day off.
Really?
Where it's
Okay.
like, yeah, it's so
Maybe you should. Maybe you should. Maybe you should take the Sabbath.
I agree. I'm not gonna disagree with you. I agree with you 1,000%. Of like I know the like at that intellectual level, like I know that I need to
Mhm.
like recover, and
Wait,
that
it's science. It's science, and you're disobeying science. What is
yeah
wrong with you?
yeah.
Are you a conservative?
Oh, that's a whole yeah. That also touches upon a lot, but like it's always that is the balancing act, of like I consciously know better, and I have spoken about overtraining like on stream, like I have experience like as a personal trainer, and yet
Oh,
like go ahead.
you'll appreciate this one too as a trainer, right? You know what's a good one, a good exercise in self acceptance. Okay,
Yeah.
training for consistency rather than fucking intensity.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yes.
but it's like okay. So now I'm at a point where most of the days I start my day with a swim, right? I go to the pool. I have
Swimming
my
is great.
routine, right? Yeah. So I go for a swim. Actually, no, I alternate between things. But anyways, 2 days a week I go for a swim. Okay, Tuesday and Thursday, and it's nice. I go for a nice swim. I do my 1 kilometer in the pool. All right, and then I take a steam. I just sit in the fucking Turkish sauna, Turkish bath sauna, okay, for fucking a few 20 minutes, okay, with a cold shower in between, and just like let my mind wander, because you're talking about mindfulness, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I find we're so bombarded with like stimuli all the time, especially people watching Twitch. But hey, you're doing it to yourself. I'm sorry, but anyways, but
You're not wrong.
That's fine. Oh, don't feel bad. You do you. But it's pretty beneficial to take a few minutes, even if it's 5 minutes a day, to just be bored and do nothing. Okay, let your mind into that mode where it can connect dots in the back of your brain.
Oh
You
yeah,
know?
I agree with you 1,000%. Where it's I do practice. I attempt. I attempt to practice mindfulness. I have an app that I set aside 10 minutes each morning. Go through a guided mindfulness meditation practice with an app that I have on my phone. Whether I'm actually good at it or like, yeah, I agree with you that being bored is like I think that's a lost skill that we have.
Yeah.
But I agree with you 1,000%. That is important.
What do you mean you're trying to do the mindfulness thing?
Because it's like I follow the instructions, and you're the idea, from what I understand, and as I go through the research, like you're supposed to learn how to be in the present moment. I was just like, hey, not judge your thoughts, not judge your feelings, and just just be. But like I have nothing to go by of like, hey, there's no like thumbs up saying, hey, you're doing it, right? No like, there's nothing to track.
Right.
So it's kind of like, I mean, basically what I'm saying is, I
You
don't
find it unrewarding.
no, not that it's unrewarding, but rather like, I have nothing to track on paper of like, hey, like you're seeing progress in like this thing, like your cholesterol is going down, your mindfulness is like going up, your ability to be present going up.
Right.
You just kind of have to have faith
Hmm. What
That
does
is
the
correct.
mindful as app do? It gets you into a mode and then tells you, okay, now for 5 minutes you're gonna fucking not think about the stuff.
So the one that I have, it's pretty
Uh,
simple. It's like it starts off like, hey, whatever, sit down, back straight,
uh,
focus on your breath. So it's a lot of focusing
uh,
on your breath.
right.
And then like every once in a while, it's like, hey, think of a friend or like someone you care about, and like
Hmm.
think positively or think loving thoughts about them.
Right, right. Yeah, basically, yeah. Capture what your nervous system considers a positive feeling, a place where you feel safe or accepted or whatever the fuck you need in life, right?
Yeah.
And just try to hold on to that for a little while, right? Just to get your nervous system basically saying, "Hey, I like being in this mode, and I want to be in this mode more."
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Whether it's
Okay.
whether it's actually working or having any benefit,
Mhm.
obviously I don't know. I just kind of like have faith that it is.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
that's why I say
Okay.
like I
Okay.
attempt.
Okay. Well, you know what? I don't see why you say you're trying though. I mean, you're doing it. It's okay if you do an imperfect job. You know.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
I know you don't have the checks and balances, right? But you, or sorry, the measurements, right? Because Mr. Scientist has to measure everything. But
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
that's a point of this exercise is to clear your fucking mind.
Yeah, you're not
Okay,
wrong.
and judge and judge, yeah, and judge the success of this thing, okay, not on some measurement but how you feel.
Yeah.
You know, something very like intangible. That's what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
you are 1,000% correct. Like,
I know I've been hitting them all night tonight.
and I have no problem saying that that is something that I struggle with. In terms of like I know you are correct that like it's about feelings. It's your subjective state. It's not something that you track. It's not like a number going up or down. It's like, hey, are you in touch with your emotions? And like, can you feel like what's going on?
Mhm.
And so it's and yeah, I have no problem
Yeah.
admitting that I'm probably not the most emotionally attuned person.
Oh, I know. I get it. I'm just. Oh, you don't have to say that. No, don't say that. I'm not the. It's okay. It's okay to have problems with the, or not problems. It's okay to
Yeah,
not have mastered a certain, not have reached ultimate mastery immediately of your mental habits.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
you are
yeah,
absolutely correct as well
yeah,
as that. Like I'm aware of these things too. I don't say that as sort of like a self.
yeah,
Again,
yeah. I know.
it's do as I say,
But
not.
it's your no, it's your voice. No, no. But I mean, look, it's fine. It's the way we talk about things, right? You're just
100%.
anyways.
And
Yeah.
that's why again, I in on the topic of self-acceptance, I've also spoken about self-compassion.
Mm,
And I know that,
yeah.
I'm not the best at practicing self-compassion. Uh
Stop it. Stop it. Stop that right now, Corey Campbell. Stop that right now, Corey Campbell. Don't you fucking, oh, by the way, I know I'm not saying this from a place of, okay, just say it, please.
uh,
All right,
I,
it's fine. It's fine. Say it all you want. Don't be self-conscious about it. I'm just gonna make a little snickering joke about it.
that's what hey, it's
Uh,
fair play.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I open myself up to these criticisms. And like these are all like good criticisms.
Cr-
Uh it's
I'm not criticizing you.
no, I know.
I'm playing with your personality.
Y- you're but you are
Yeah,
calling attention to
yeah.
things that are important. I
Okay,
want to
fair
bring
enough.
attention
Fair
to,
enough.
for
Fair
sure.
enough. Yes, yes. I feel like we can agree on that description of it.
Uh,
Absolutely.
but have you noticed? So going on like feelings, like obviously I understand probably that you subjectively feel better. But have you noticed like
Yeah.
other things as well in terms of like something else enhanced? I assume like whatever, less stress.
I can't. I can't tell you. Well, I mean, I can't tell you if it's any one thing. Okay, but I guess I've been systematically reevaluating how I do things and optimizing them for certain patterns that make me be a better me, you know?
Mhm.
And like this. Like I take more time off to just relax. Sometimes alone, sometimes go for walks, long walks, anytime where I'm alone, okay? And just let my mind wander. And I take a lot more time for that, a lot more time for myself, which has been something very difficult for me because I've always been since a young, like I had kids really young, right? And I stayed and I cared about them. and stuff like that. My art always made it my first priority. So for me, like, I've always been kind of like giving all my time to my family and my kids. I love them so much and stuff, right? And I never really took time for me, and I was getting bitter about it with knowing it, you know. And for a long time, with all the other stresses of, you know, and not finishing university yet, and having 1 and 2 kids on the way, and it was all unexpected. It doesn't matter. That's not what we're talking about. Anyways, so I developed some bad thinking habits, bad personal thinking habits, and I forgot where I was going. Where was I going? Get me back on track here.
Well, I asked you about, you know, positive effects on your life and other positive effects on your life.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. Right. Sorry, I am very pedantic. Anyways, yeah, it's just there's a bunch of stuff. Anyways, well, I find I'm more productive. I'm more productive for the small amount of time that I do have to do stuff. Okay, I'm in a better mood. So I'm more engaged with it, and I find that when I'm engaged, I seem to have fucking superpowers in terms of like the amount of things I'm allowed to do. I've never been this productive. But the reason is that I take way more time for myself, even though it's like I was almost conditioned to be like, oh, don't be selfish and stuff like that. No, being selfish is something that I was missing. And I don't mean selfish like, I would take my, but being selfish, I guess, with my time and giving it to myself. That was like a big hurdle. And then when I started doing that, I could start connecting with having places where I'm not like harassed by someone needing something, okay, or some problem I needed to solve. And I could let my mind wander more, and it would let me connect the dots. Also, it would give me a time for my nervous system to get calm, to not be agitated by some stimuli coming in. And that's it. I do a lot of stuff to focus on getting my nervous system to not be so stressed out about something. Right, and it's like the break that it gives my nervous system the time to recover, and therefore the times where I should be stressed, I'm not as stressed.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, so you literally are pretty much an example of like the research that I was just going over in terms of like self-acceptance and self-compassion appears to put you in a better position to deal with stress, and that you appear to become like more resilient.
You know who I really like, actually? I mean, I was going through this, and as I was going through this, I was listening to this book. I'm not saying this book caused anything, but it's just funny. I was listening to this book as I was going through these, I guess, habit changes and stuff. Anyways, it was very interesting. Dr. Nicole, I think she's a doctor, I don't know. Nicole LaPera, all right?
Yes.
And she has a bunch of...
The holistic psychologist, I think, How to Do the Work is one of her books.
Actually... There's something, I don't know, I haven't really looked into it. There's something a little culty about her, but honestly, the book is pretty decent. The book is pretty fucking decent.
I'm sure it is. Or I have no doubt. You know, it's got to be popular for a reason. And I do believe they are they're not a medical doctor, but they have a PhD. And I believe they were. I'm not 100% certain.
I'll just tell you, I'll tell you this. It pretty much encapsulates a way of thinking about how to manage your emotions that very much mirrors the way I've approached it. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense to look at things this way, right?
Yeah.
To just kind of take in the complexity of it all.
Yeah, I think they are big on like emotion regulation, and also like emotion regulation through attachment, all that stuff. So it's like, that's not surprising. And I do believe they were licensed at one point. I don't know if they are currently licensed, but I think they were licensed as a clinical psychologist at one point.
Look, I'm not saying join their fucking cult, okay?
No.
The book's pretty decent.
It doesn't surprise me. Like, again, I stumble across some of their content because they're pretty big on social media, and like their content does seem to be pretty up. They're the expert, I'm not, but everything that they say appears to be like research backed based on the research that I've seen.
Check it out.
Absolutely.
Am I a PhD candidate? Why are you trying to insult me, Bubba the Bub? No, I'm not a PhD candidate.
I think they just have an issue with having friendly conversations. That's all. I wouldn't take it personally.
You have to have unfriendly conversations?
I don't.
Bubba the Bub, like, what are you even here for? Like, you don't want friendly. Are you arguing with people nonstop, Corey Campbell?
No. Well, you know,
What?
they are taking understandable issue that I'm in the science and technology category.
Oh, I see. Okay. Don't worry. My joint is finished, Bubba the Bub. I'm gonna leave soon. Okay, and then we can get back to data and evidence. Okay, I'm just saying, as someone, okay, who's out here, and and Corey was talking about, you were talking about self-acceptance, okay,
100%.
and mindfulness, okay, and I've had experience using these, and you know what? Since I've been using them, and I'm describing how I'm using them, my life, okay, I feel is functioning much better, and I feel like that's knowledge worth imparting, because it's relevant to this scientific, thing that Corey Campbell is trying to do, but also you're practicing how these relationships and reflecting on how these relationships work when you actually apply them.
Yeah,
Okay?
I mean,
I feel like that's relevant information.
It is. That's why,
Yeah.
like, I was literally covering the research, like the scientific research and
exactly.
evidence on self-acceptance, and you said, "Hey,
Right.
this applies to me."
Long story short, I'm right. I'm right. I'm right, and you're wrong, Bubba the Bub. Okay, so I'm going to leave soon, Corey. It's very nice chatting with you again.
It's always a pleasure. As much as I understand you leaving the space, like you're missed by me in the space.
Okay, this is why I want to talk to you about the fucking pool. Okay, it all comes down to this. It was a roundabout way to get to this. All right, yeah, I really enjoy the fucking Steam, because it's like, yeah, it's 20 minutes, okay, where I get to think about nothing, okay, except whatever I want to think about. No one's gonna harass me. And you know what? You're like, you let your mind wander, but if ever you need to focus on something, you come back to the heat in your body and the sweat, okay, and then once you worry, you're like, fuck this heat. All right. Lord bless me with $1 million. You know?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Or whatever else you wanna work out in your life, right?
Yeah.
And
I think setting aside time to be alone with your thoughts. I think that's
it. So that's it, Bubba the Bub. That's why this is my practitioner's advice. Okay. All right. Go for a steam once in a while. All right, take a schwitz. All right. All right, once in a while, it's great for your mental health. Okay, and you can practice acceptance. Okay, and definitely meditation. All right, and the schwitz.
1000%.
Exactly. That's what I recommend. Okay.
And you have my stamp of approval on that, for whatever it's worth.
There you go. Go for a schwitz. Find your schwitz in life. All right, and go for it.
Wise word.
There. Exactly. All right. Have a good night, Corey Campbell.
Always a pleasure. Take care. Be well. Great to talk to you. Always.
Take care, man.
Take care.
Bye.
What? Managing your mental health during any sort of whatever academic pursuit is super important. Especially given the research showing that there's, a mental health crisis in academia. Which, if you want scientific evidence showing that there's a mental health crisis in graduate education, I have scientific evidence to show that. Among a whole bunch of other things. Okay, I don't know what point you're trying to make. I don't know if you're a scientist as well, but I'm not sure if you're aware that time is a variable, and just because something occurred in the past does not mean that it has to occur in the present, or just because something took place in the past and that's how it was in the past, that means that that's how it exactly is today. But time is a variable. FYI. Yes, I'm going to put the rest of my self-acceptance research on hold for now. I'm gonna revisit it because I want to cover the other whoopsies. The other main topic of the stream, which is optogenetics. In preparation for this paper here, a neuroscience paper, about, so like I said, this is optogenetics and neuroscience, but also biochemistry, protein engineering. But before we dive into this paper, I should probably give a little bit of a primer or introduction to optogenetics. But why cover it? Even though whatever, it's part of science, so that's good enough reason to cover it. But it's also a pretty powerful technique. It's whatever has taken off in the past few years. And I think its popularity and power is only going to get increase further and further. And as highlighted here, it was Method of the Year in 2010. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're opening up a can of worms that I don't think you quite understand, Bubba. That's more of a philosophical discussion. Like, what is voluntary? I mean, this comes back to what I was talking about earlier when it comes to body positivity, fat acceptance, fat shaming. This is what people say of like, oh, you don't have to put it in your mouth, you don't have to eat. It's a choice. But that's what they say in psychology, kind of like a black and white thinking, and that it's way more complicated than that. So, why was this hailed as Method of the Year in 2010? And its popularity and power has only increased. Sure, there are a lot of valid criticisms to levy at psychology, and I levy them myself in terms of a replication crisis, in terms of a lot of flawed methodology, etc., etc. But that does not put it in the realm of pseudoscience at all. And I would say you probably wouldn't recognize actual science. But yeah, that does not discount the entire discipline or field of psychology at all. I would say that's pretty pseudoscientific belief, that because there are flaws in a field, that it's all baloney in pseudoscience. No, cargo cult. I don't even think you're familiar with that term. Cargo cult is like a specific thing in terms of like these small, very small remote communities that literally see cargo fall and whatever, start a religion cult because of that. I think that's a really bad analogy. With the capacity to control cellular behaviors using light and genetically encoded light-sensitive proteins, optogenetics has opened new doors for experimentation across biological fields. Yeah, I have no doubt that there are cargo cult science. That's not psychology. The ability to systematically perturb and interrogate cellular behaviors in biology has lagged behind our ability to observe these behaviors. The use of light for perturbation, similarly to its use for measurement, can achieve fast, spatially controlled, and minimally invasive modulation of cellular activity. About the rigors. Well, you do realize the replication crisis is not exclusive not exclusive to psychology. It might be worse in psychology because it's very difficult to control for a lot of the variables in psychology when it comes to human behaviors and studying humans, as opposed to whatever proteins in solution or microbes that you've genetically engineered. It's heavily affiliated with psychology, but it's not exclusive to psychology. As someone who's literally tried to follow the methodology of a published paper and have not been able to reproduce it, there are very many things that get published in the life sciences, in biology, biochemistry, that cannot be reproduced. That I have experienced, that my fellow colleagues have experienced. Retractions still happen in the life sciences a lot. So to say that this is all just the realm of psychology is just not factually accurate at all. Like, just go through Retraction Watch, and you'll see. So although scientists have pursued the idea of using light to control the activity of cells for several decades, the available methods had drawbacks that limited their utility. Optogenetics, our choice of method of the year 2010, overcomes many of these drawbacks by combining the use of light and genetically encoded light-sensitive proteins for the behavior of living cells and organisms. Genetic targeting provides exquisite cell specificity in the intact animal in a manner that cannot be achieved with other photostimulation methods that entirely rely on optical uncaging of signaling molecules, for example. Sure, you never said that, but you say it's heavily affiliated with, so I'll even grant you that. It's heavily affiliated, but it's not exclusive. So then the question becomes like, what's your benchmark for labeling psychology as pseudoscience? It's like, whatever, 20% reproducibility crisis, and therefore, since psychology is above that, psychology is pseudoscience. You just seem to have some arbitrary metric. That is all. In recent years, optogenetics has become a booming field thanks to several technological developments. The search for light-sensitive proteins capable of controlling particular cellular behaviors has yielded a diverse set of tools with different functionality. Progress in the light delivery technologies, particularly in microscopy, has enabled unprecedented control over in vitro and in vivo illumination. Finally, there have been remarkable improvements both in the strategies to express genes in cells of interest in living organisms, as well as in the readout technologies used to measure the biological effects induced by optogenetics. No, so I do not do the technique of optogenetics. I have covered it. I've taken an advanced cellular neuroscience class where we did a fairly deep dive on it, but I'm certainly not a world-renowned expert on optogenetics. But I'm aware of, let's say, how they genetically engineer and modify the organisms, or largely the mice that they use. So, so then, I guess my question to you is, what can or can I not review? Because, so, I brought up this paper. Okay, I am giving a primer on optogenetics. I'm reviewing it because it's cool, and I enjoy reviewing it. That is the ultimate answer. That I think this is basically information that I think if people are curious about it, I would want to share it. That's all. It's the same reason why whatever I do workout streams. It's like, if you are interested in learning about how to improve your physical fitness, how to build muscle, then I might be able to provide some information that may be beneficial to you. Uh, well, the summary is here. I'm going through it like as we speak. FYI. Optogenetics has already changed the way many neuroscience studies are performed. The technique offers the capacity for multimodal control of neuronal activity in specific cells and at timescales relevant to the brain's in vivo physiology. I would say this is basically a good summary in like a short, succinct sentence. The technique offers the capacity for multimodal control of neuronal activity in specific cells and at timescales relevant to the brain's in vivo physiology. So it essentially allows us right now to, let's say, target certain cells in the brain and, let's say, stimulate neuronal activity. Some semblance of control at the cellular level in the brain in targeted areas. No, absolutely not with that resolution. Not in a living organism. As in, here, I will give you maybe an example. Hopefully this pops up. Probably in supplementary. Whatever. Okay, so in this paper here, okay, absolutely not. Nowhere close. Like I said, there's a reason why in 2010, not that whatever this is like the be all and end all of techniques, but it was whatever given the the honor of method of the year in 2010. Because it allows, let's say, something as powerful as this, of like controlling, so what they did, okay, is they engineered, okay, this mouse such that, at the pulse of a light, so what you're seeing here, below the picture with the whiskers, that red vertical bar, that's when they pulse the light. And when they pulse the light, that's when you see the whiskers move. Where it's like, hey, we're basically, at a kind of like cellular level, we're able to control the cells responsible for whisker movement. And in this particular paper, okay, that I'm going to cover, typically when it comes to optogenetics and controlling cells in the brain, they usually have to implant something in the brain because those specific genetically modified cells, they actually need to be exposed to light. But in this particular paper, they engineered it such that the light is actually outside or close. They don't need to actually surgically implant a photoelectrode into the brain. It's literally like just a light close to their head that they pulse that allows them to control whisker movement. So it's like each time that they pulse the light, that red vertical bar, that's when the whiskers move. And again, this is without, that surgical implantation of the electrode. Well, I'm trying to build up to it. This is a very complex technique that I need to go through and build up step by step. Where you'd have to understand certain concepts of like light, and how do you control cells, light. So that's why like I'm saving the paper. I'm not diving right into the paper, because if I dive right into the paper, it doesn't make any sense. I have to, lay some groundwork. But it boils down to certain cells in their brain have been modified that makes them responsive to light. Okay, certain cells in this mouse's brain have been genetically modified such that they are expressing a specific protein that is responsive to light. They are specifically expressing a channel rhodopsin that I will cover in a moment. Digital Bean, welcome. And I agree with you. Photons be crazy. I hope you're doing well. Pleasure to see you. So in recent years, optogenetics has become a booming field thanks to several technological developments. The search for light-sensitive proteins. Okay, so as I spoke about earlier, but you might not have been here, this technique, optogenetics, is really, at the intersection between microbiology, molecular biology, biochemistry, and obviously neuroscience. Because as they say here, yes, it's become a booming field thanks to several technological developments. Like, multiple things have occurred across multiple fields that has allowed this technique to take off, and resulted in this very powerful technique. Controlling, it might seem trivial of just like moving whiskers, but like you're controlling something in another organism just through a pulse of light. Okay, I think that's pretty powerful, and this is just an example, because there are other more crazy things that have been done. Maybe not crazy, but other more like way complex, but potentially more impressive things. So, as they highlight here, I'm a biochemist, so I work with proteins. And so it's also one of the reasons why I'm covering it. Because, like I said, at the intersection of multiple fields, including biochemistry and, light-sensitive proteins. So this is like a category of proteins that appear to have this, special property that they actually respond to light. They actually undergo certain conformational changes in response to light, specific wavelengths of light. So that's the key thing. As in, your typical, mouse in the wild, not light sensitive. Like this mouse, okay? This mouse was specifically engineered to have their whiskers light sensitive. That is what they're trying to demonstrate here. Like, hey, we've made the whiskers of this mouse light sensitive. And like I mentioned, that red vertical bar, that's when they pulse the light. That's why it's each time it goes by that red vertical bar, that's when the whiskers move. Each time they pulse the light, they get whisker movement. But this is like a proof of concept. They're using this as an example of like, hey, they engineered something that usually the pulse of light, it has to be like inside the brain. There's a surgical implantation of a photoelectrode in the brain, because like those proteins that have been that are expressed in the genetically engineered cells in the brain, those cells need to be exposed to light. They can't be exposed to light if it's outside your skull. The actual power of this paper or of this research is like they were able to engineer the protein such that it actually is able to respond to light without surgical implantation of a photoelectrode. So they made the, yes, well, no, they didn't make the whiskers. They didn't make the whiskers light sensitive, because whisker movement, it's controlled by cells in the brain. Okay? So they made the cells in the brain that control whisker movement light sensitive. So it's not the whiskers, it's not, there's nothing here that you're seeing in the video that is light sensitive. It's inside the brain. I can show you, because I believe they have a figure in the paper. It is right. Yes, right. Can't really zoom in. Whether you can see my cursor, but it's this figure here. Okay. It's not in the brain. It's just like by their head. So it's figure C, okay? And that's highlighted here. Schematic of an awake mouse, so expressing a reacher, so that's that engineered protein in the facial motor nucleus. Okay, so that's inside the brain, as in they're saying, hey, this now engineered protein, okay, it's being expressed in this region of the brain, the facial motor nucleus, okay? And now it is photo-activated by LEDs placed at the opening of the external auditory canal. So basically it's by the ear, where that little green, or where this arrow, these arrows are pointing. So they are what is actually happening is they are controlling cells in the brain through light just by the ear. They're trying to hit a specific region. Like that's why they say it here. This reacher in the facial motor nucleus, photo activated by LEDs. No, maybe I misspoke, but I said, typically speaking, the typical technique is like you implant something, okay? You implant a photoelectrode in the brain, okay? And then you shine the light like inside the brain. Basically the special part of this paper is like they're showing like, hey, you don't need to implant something in the brain. You don't need to open up and expose the brain. But they are not trying to open up the brain here. Like, if anything, it's like the exact opposite. Yeah, so like, the light, that photoelectrode, or as they sort of say it here, the LEDs placed by the ear. And then, yeah, you know, vibrissae, so fancy technical term for whisker movements, were recorded with high-speed video. That's what I showed there. Like that is what makes this paper, let's say, special, in that they engineered something that responds to a different wavelength of light. It's more in the orange to red, and that allows it to penetrate deeper into tissue. So it's actually special. Where was I? Right, so yeah. But like the groundwork, or like, you know, the early days of this, okay? I think this was like 2013, 2015, something like that. Yeah, 2013. Even this was somewhat early date. But it largely started with, like, you know, you have to implant a photoelectrode in the brain, in addition to genetically engineering the certain cells in the brain that you want responsive to light. And so, like, yeah, it started with these light-sensitive proteins that were discovered in microorganisms. Like, they are literally getting foreign protein expressed in other organisms. As in, these light-sensitive proteins, they come from bacteria. And so they're using bacterial proteins expressed in, let's say, for example, certain cells in the mouse brain. And then from there, you know, carrying out the optogenetic technique. That's why I say it's an intersection of multiple fields. Because it's like, you know, through microbiology, we found that, hey, bacteria, they have these special proteins that appear to be light sensitive. These are kind of like, these are arguably, let's say, you know, the eyes of bacteria or microorganisms. They're called channel rhodopsins. They serve as sensory photoreceptors and unicellular green algae. Sorry, yeah, not bacteria, unicellular green algae. But either way, microorganism. So like they're the light sensitive proteins, they are not native like mice. They're putting special proteins from an entirely different species, microorganism, and they're expressing it, you know, in mice in that particular paper. And they probably talk about optogenetics. Sure. Yeah, channel rhodopsins can readily be expressed in excitable cells such as neurons. And yeah, as they say, an emerging field known as optogenetics. Like these special proteins, okay, found in microorganisms. So that's why it started with, you know, some microbiology of like discovering these types of proteins. And then from there, it's like, okay, well, what can we do with them? You know, at first glance, doesn't seem all that special in terms of like, oh, okay, well, you have these proteins and they seem to respond to light. You know, they're light-gated ion channels. But, you know, it's through, you know, trial and error and discovery that, oh, we found that, oh, we can genetically engineer organisms, other organisms, such as mice, to express them in certain areas of the brain. Where was? Yes. Progress in the light delivery technologies, particularly in microscopy, has enabled unprecedented control over in vitro and in vivo illumination. Finally, there have been remarkable improvements in both in the strategies to express genes in cells of interest in living organisms, as well as in the readout technologies used to measure the biological effects induced by optogenetics. Right. So, like I said, intersection between microbiology, molecular biology, and biochemistry, where it's like, okay, yes, we've discovered these special proteins, these channel rhodopsins, in other microorganisms. And okay, well, maybe we can, so then maybe someone had the idea of like, hey, maybe we can express them in other organisms, maybe specifically neurons in other organisms, such as mice. But then how do we get them to express proteins? Well, that would come from genetic engineering. You know, you have to implant other genes from these microorganisms and get these, you know, for example, mice to express them. So that's another hurdle that had to be overcome. And that's why they're talking about it here. Or like there have been remarkable improvements both in the strategies to express genes in cells of interest in living organisms, as well as in the readout technologies used to measure the biological effects induced by optogenetics. So it's like, it requires genetic engineering, and it required improvements in genetic engineering to be able to, get these channel rhodopsin, in other organisms. Optogenetics has already changed the way many neuroscience studies are performed. The technique offers the capacity for multimodal control of neuronal activity in specific cells, and at times scales relevant to the brain's in vivo physiology. In recent years, the use of optogenetics in neuroscience studies has shown its potential to unveil the causal relationship between the activity of specific neurons and the behaviors they control. Optogenetics has also contributed to our understanding of the biology that underlies several diseases of the nervous system, with new tools allowing control over a variety of diverse cellular events. Optogenetics is now poised to prove its potential in other biological fields as well. In a primer, we outline the basic principles of optogenetics and describe some of the methodology used in optogenetic experiments. A news piece focuses on how optogenetics has grown over the years. We also include a short video about optogenetics on our website, where visitors can see the potential of this. Carl Dieseroth, who is, let's say one of the key pioneers in this field. I believe, if I remember correctly, they're a psychiatrist, and I think as of right now, pretty noted psychiatrists, given the work they do with this, along with a whole bunch of other work that they do. Describes in a commentary some of the recent developments in optogenetics and discusses technological advances that the field will be tackling. Karel Svoboda and Simon Perron discuss how the marrying of optogenetics with sophisticated light delivery technologies and genetically encoded reporters of neuronal activity will overcome challenges in the study of brain function. Optogenetics can already be used to control diverse intracellular processes, including the localization of proteins to certain parts of the cell or the production of specific second messenger molecules. Wendell A. Lim and colleagues discuss how the use of these tools to modulate cell signaling cascades will accelerate our understanding of cellular biology. As with many other rapidly evolving technologies, there is still much room for improvement. Peter Hageman and Andreas, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that, discuss the different strategies that will enrich and improve the optogenetic toolbox. Similarly to previous years, our special feature also includes a section of methods to watch, a short list of technologies, necessarily incomplete, that we will be keeping an eye on in the coming years. The maturing of a technology such as optogenetics, born as an idea in the minds of many scientists and the fruit of multidisciplinary developments. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm trying to highlight, in that there are many fields coming together that results in this powerful technique. Is inevitably a collaborative achievement. In describing this technique and its history, we have necessarily failed to mention many technological developments and research groups that have contributed to the advancement of the field. Optogenetic technology is increasingly being applied in many laboratories around the world and across disciplines. The possible applications of optogenetics still have to be fully explored. We believe that the transformative effect of using light to modulate defined events in specific cells is on its way to great achievements, has the potential to illuminate unexplored avenues of science. So, with this, let's say, brief primer, I think it's worth going back to kind of like its roots, or kind of like the very early days of optogenetics, and kind of let's say the father of the technique, so to speak, is this person here, Eero Mazenbach. I think they have a really great TED Talk that we're kind of like going to watch to wrap up, as kind of like my first part of optogenetics. Then hopefully I'm going to come back to it, cover more of it tomorrow. At least that's the plan. But I think this is just a good way to show the example of, let's say, its potential when it first started.
I have a doppelganger. Dr. Gero is a brilliant but slightly mad scientist in the Dragon Ball Z android saga. If you look very carefully, you see that his skull has been replaced with a transparent plexiglass dome so that the workings of his brain can be observed and also controlled.
Yeah, this is a fairly old talk. 12 years old, I believe. Yeah. Or like in 2010, so I guess 13 years.
Controlled with light. That's exactly what I do. Optical mind control. But in contrast to my evil twin, who lusts after world domination, my motives are not sinister. I control the brain in order to understand how it works. Now, wait a minute, you may say. How can you go straight to controlling the brain without understanding it first? Isn't that putting the cart before the horse? Many neuroscientists agree with this view and think that understanding will come from more detailed observation and analysis. They say, if we could record the activity of all neurons, we would understand the brain. But think for a moment what that means. Even if we could measure what every cell is doing at all times, we would still have to make sense of the recorded activity patterns. And that's so difficult, chances are we'll understand these patterns just as little as the brains that produce them. Take a look at what brain activity might look like. In this simulation, each black dot is one nerve cell. The dot is visible whenever the cell fires an electrical impulse. There's 10,000 neurons here, so you're looking at roughly 1% of the brain of a cockroach. Your brains are about 100 million times more complicated. Somewhere in a pattern like this is you, your perceptions, your emotions, your memories, your plans for the future. But we don't know where, since we don't know how to read the pattern. We don't understand the code used by the brain. To make progress, we need to break the code. But how? An experienced code breaker will tell you that in order to figure out what the symbols in a code mean, it's essential to be able to play with them, to rearrange them at will. So in this situation too, to decode the information contained in patterns like this, watching alone won't do. We need to rearrange the pattern. In other words, instead of recording the activity of neurons, we need to control it. It's not essential that we can control the activity of all neurons in the brain, just some. The more targeted our interventions, the better, and I'll show you in a moment how we can achieve the necessary precision. And since I'm realistic rather than grandiose, I don't claim that the ability to control the function of the nervous system will at once unravel all its mysteries, but we'll certainly learn a lot. Now, I'm by no means the first person to realize how powerful a tool intervention is. The history of attempts to tinker with the function of the nervous system is long and illustrious. It dates back at least 200 years to Galvani's famous experiments in the late 18th century and beyond. Galvani showed that a frog's legs twitched when he connected the lumbar nerve to a source of electrical current. This experiment revealed the first and perhaps most fundamental nugget of the neural code, that information is written in the form of electrical impulses. Galvani's approach of probing the nervous system with electrodes has remained state-of-the-art until today, despite a number of drawbacks. Sticking wires into the brain is obviously rather crude. It's hard to do in animals that run around, and there is a physical limit to the number of wires that can be inserted simultaneously. So, around the turn of the last century, I started to think, wouldn't it be wonderful if one could take this logic and turn it upside down? So instead of inserting a wire into one spot of the brain, re-engineer the brain itself so that some of its neuronal elements become responsive to a diffusely broadcast signal, such as a flash of light. Such an approach would, literally in a flash of light, overcome many of the obstacles to discovery. First, it's clearly a non-invasive, wireless form of communication. And second, just as in a radio broadcast, you can communicate with many receivers at once. You don't need to know where these receivers are. And it doesn't matter if these receivers move. Just think of the stereo in your car. It gets even better. For it turns out that we can fabricate the receivers out of materials that are encoded in DNA. So each nerve cell with the right genetic...
So what he's essentially alluding to is like this targeted approach of like, hey, getting certain cells in your brain responsive to the light. Saying like, yeah, the signal can come from light, but not every single cell in the brain will be responsive to that light. I think you pretty much just said, going to engineer the receivers. Like, hey, only certain cells will have those receivers, and those receivers will come in the form of, you know, those channel rhodopsins, those, you know, special light sensitive proteins. So they're, through genetic engineering, they're only going to get certain cells to express those light sensitive proteins.
Genetic makeup will spontaneously produce a receiver that allows us to control its function. I hope you'll appreciate the beautiful simplicity of this concept. There's no high-tech gizmos here, just biology revealed through biology. Now let's take a look at these miraculous receivers up close. As we zoom in on one of these purple neurons, we see that its outer membrane is studded with microscopic pores. Pores like these conduct electrical current and are responsible for all the communication in the nervous system. But these pores here are special. They are coupled to light receptors, similar to the ones in your eyes. Whenever a flash of light hits the receptor, the pore opens and electrical current is switched on, and the neuron fires electrical impulses. Because the light-activated pore is encoded in DNA, we can achieve incredible precision. This is because, although each cell in our bodies contains the same set of genes, different mixes of genes get turned on and off in different cells. We can exploit this to make sure that only some neurons contain our light-activated pore and others don't. So in this cartoon, the bluish white cell in the upper left corner does not respond to light because it lacks the light-activated pore. The approach works so well that we can write purely artificial messages directly to the brain. In this example, each electrical impulse, each deflection on the trace is caused by a brief pulse of light. And the approach, of course, also works in moving, behaving animals. This is the first ever such experiment, sort of the optical equivalent of Galvani's. It was done 6 or 7 years ago by my then graduate student, Susanna Lima. Susanna had engineered the fruit fly on the left so that just 2 out of the 200,000 cells in its brain expressed the light-activated pore. You're familiar with these cells because they are the ones that frustrate you when you try to swat the fly. They trigger the escape reflex that makes the fly jump into the air and fly away whenever you...
He's actually showing a very similar proof of concept that, you know, I just showed in the paper and the video and the whisker movement of like, hey, just through like a pulse of light, the whiskers move, and here just through a pulse of light, you know, the fly starts, you know, activating its wings.
You move your hand in position. And you can see here that the flash of light has exactly the same effect. The animal jumps, it spreads its wings, it vibrates them, but it can't actually take off because the fly is sandwiched between 2 glass plates. Now, to make sure that this was no reaction of the fly to a flash it could see, Susanna did a simple but brutally effective experiment. She cut the heads off of our flies. These headless bodies can live for about a day, but they don't do much. They just stand around and groom excessively. So it seems that the only trait that survives decapitation is vanity. Anyway, as you'll see in a moment, Susanna was able to turn on the flight motor of what's the equivalent of the spinal cord of these flies and get some of the headless bodies to actually take off and fly away. They didn't get very far, obviously. Since we took these first steps, the field of optogenetics has exploded, and there's now hundreds of labs using these approaches. And we've come a long way since Galvani's and Susanna's first successes in making animals twitch or jump. We can now actually interfere with their psychology in rather profound ways, as I'll show you in my last example, which is directed at a familiar question. Life is a string of choices, creating a constant pressure to decide what to do next. We cope with this pressure by having brains, and within our brains, decision-making centers that I've called here the actor. The actor implements a policy that takes into account the state of the environment and the context in which we operate. Our actions change the environment or the context, and these changes are then fed back into the decision loop. Now, to put some neurobiological meat on this abstract model, we constructed a simple one-dimensional world for our favorite subjects, fruit flies. Each chamber in these two vertical stacks contains one fly. The left and the right halves of the chamber are filled with two different odors, and the security camera watches as the flies pace up and down between them. Here's some such CCTV footage. Whenever a fly reaches the midpoint of the chamber where the two odor streams meet, it has to make a decision. It has to decide whether to turn around and stay in the same odor, or whether to cross the midline and try something new. These decisions are clearly a reflection of the actor's policy. Now, for an intelligent being like our fly, this policy is not written in stone, but rather changes as the animal learns from experience. We can incorporate such an element of adaptive intelligence into our model by assuming that the fly's brain contains not only an actor, but a different group of cells, a critic that provides a running commentary on the actor's choices. You can think of this nagging inner voice as sort of the brain's equivalent of the Catholic Church, if you're an Austrian like me, or the superego if you're a Freudian, or your mother if you're Jewish. Now, obviously, the critic is a key ingredient in what makes us intelligent. So we set out to identify the cells in the fly's brain that played the role of the critic. And the logic of our experiment was simple. We thought if we could use our optical remote control to activate the cells of the critic, we should be able artificially to nag the actor into changing its policy. In other words, the fly should learn from mistakes that it thought it had made, but in reality, it had not made. So we bred flies whose brains were more or less randomly peppered with cells that were light addressable. And then we took these flies and allowed them to make choices. And whenever they made one of the two choices, chose one odor, in this case the blue one over the orange one, we switched on the lights. If the critic was among the optically activated cells, the result of this intervention should be a change in policy. The fly should learn to avoid the optically reinforced odor. Here's what happened in two instances. We're comparing two strains of flies, each of them having about 100 light addressable cells in their brains, shown here in green on the left and on the right. What's common among these groups of cells is that they all produce the neurotransmitter dopamine. But the identities of the individual dopamine-producing neurons are clearly largely different on the left and on the right. Optically activating these 100 or so cells in the two strains of flies had dramatically different consequences. If you look first at the behavior of the fly on the right, you can see that whenever it reaches the midpoint of the chamber where the two odors meet, it marches straight through, as it did before. Its behavior is completely unchanged. But the behavior of the fly on the left is very different. Whenever it comes up to the midpoint, it pauses, it carefully scans the odor interface as if it was sniffing out its environment, and then it turns around. This means that the policy that the actor implements now includes an instruction to avoid the odor that's in the right half of the chamber. This means that the critic must have spoken in that animal, and that the critic must be contained among the dopamine-producing neurons on the left, but not among the dopamine-producing neurons on the right. Through many such experiments, we were able to narrow down the identity of the critic to just 12 cells. These 12 cells are shown here in green. They send their output to a brain structure called the mushroom body.
So yeah, they're using this technique to kind of like map out certain areas of as they sort of say, they're able to narrow down, the region that appears to be responsible for this critic center, like 12 cells. So like really trying to, well, map out the brain, which, that is also an important, let's say, aspect of neuroscience, because like the brain is highly interconnected, and like don't know exactly. We basically haven't mapped it out. So like the more we can map it out, the better.
Which is shown here in gray. We know from our formal model that the brain structure at the receiving end of the critic's commentary is the actor. So this anatomy suggests that the mushroom bodies have something to do with action choice. Based on everything we know about the mushroom bodies, this makes perfect sense. In fact, it makes so much sense that we can construct an electronic toy circuit that simulates the behavior of the fly. In this electronic toy circuit, the mushroom body neurons are symbolized by the vertical bank of blue LEDs in the center of the board. These LEDs are wired to sensors that detect the presence of odorous molecules in the air. Each odor activates a different combination of sensors, which in turn activates a different odor detector in the mushroom body. So the pilot in the cockpit of the fly, the actor, can tell which odor is present simply by looking at which of the blue LEDs lights up. What the actor does with this information depends on its policy, which is stored in the strengths of the connection between the odor detectors and the motors that power the fly's evasive actions. If the connection is weak, the motors will stay off and the fly will continue straight on its course. If the connection is strong, the motors will turn on and the fly will initiate a turn. Now consider a situation in which the motors stay off, the fly continues on its path, and it suffers some painful consequence, such as getting zapped. In a situation like this, we would expect the critic to speak up and to tell the actor to change its policy. We have created such a situation artificially by turning on the critic with a flash of light. That caused a strengthening of the connections between the currently active odor detector and the motors. So the next time the fly finds itself facing the same odor again, the connection is strong enough to turn on the motors and to trigger an evasive maneuver. I don't know about you, but I find it exhilarating to see how vague psychological notions evaporate and give rise to a physical, mechanistic understanding of the mind, even if it's the mind of the fly. This is one piece of good news. The other piece of good news, for us scientists at least, is that much remains to be discovered. In the experiments I told you about, we have lifted the identity of the critic, but we still have no idea how the critic does its job. Come to think of it, knowing when you're wrong without a teacher or your mother telling you is a very hard problem. There's some ideas in computer science and in artificial intelligence as to how this might be done, but we still haven't solved a single example of how intelligent behavior springs from the physical interactions in living matter. I think we'll get there in the not-too-distant future. Thank you.
Yeah, well, he's a great speaker, in my opinion. I think he gives a really good breakdown of, let's say, the field and the technique, especially, its early days, and, working with flies. Multiple reasons for that, at least as far as I can tell. I'm definitely not an expert on fly research, but, their brains are much simpler. Much less cells, as kind of like alluded to when he was talking about it. Like, yeah, they engineered like, whatever, 2 cells or like a handful of cells, and they like carried out their experiments. And then, they're able to kind of like backtrack saying, hey, these, whatever small handful of cells that we've engineered, responsive to light, it looks like they're responsible for whatever behavior, that they're measuring. Uh, so start off simple. Because if you've engineered thousands of cells, tens of thousands of cells, or hundreds of thousands of cells in the brain, and then make them light responsive, and then you try to ever you carry out your experiments, you observe the behavior, makes it more difficult to backtrack in terms of okay, which of the tens of thousands of cells are responsible for what we're observing. And obviously probably much, I assume, I don't know for sure, but I assume much easier to genetically engineer flies than mice. But with that, I'm going to end the stream here for now. I think I covered, the basics of what I wanted to cover about optogenetics. I definitely didn't cover as much as I would have wanted to. I did actually plan to cover this paper as part of my original plan. That's totally okay. I'm going to try to cover it tomorrow. Totally fine with just laying the foundation, just what optogenetics is, what are the basics of it, and then do a little bit of a deeper dive into this paper in optogenetics. Again, hopefully tomorrow. Let's see if I can find someone to raid. Looks like Universal Discourse is streaming. Think we're gonna raid them. Fellow research streamer. But they totally do different research than I do. Gonna get that set up. So thank you for the follows, Eric, Bubba the Bub, much appreciated, and Awigs22, much appreciated for the follow. I'm not sure why follow notifications didn't show up. I have to look into that. But yeah, that's super appreciated. Let me set up the raid for Universal Discourse. But yeah, I want to thank everyone that passed by. Bubba the Bub, thank you for the follow. Digital Bean, thank you so much for passing by. Bob Marley, always can't thank you enough for passing by and tuning in. Thank you, Montreal Player, for not only passing by, but having the conversation. As always, I thought it was great, despite what anybody else says. But I apologize if, you feel like I sidetracked during the stream. But that's just kind of who I am, especially if someone that I enjoy talking to wants to talk. I'll pretty much always be open to that. And thank you, Shy, much appreciated for passing by. Thank you, April. And anybody else that I forgot, I apologize. But super grateful for everyone for passing by. I plan to stream again tomorrow, or I guess technically today for me because it's past midnight. To cover more optogenetics and probably a couple other things that I have planned, but it's probably going to be mostly, if not all, devoted to optogenetics. My plan is to do that tomorrow, if not sometime during the week. And yeah, thank you everyone, super grateful, much appreciated. And if you're not following Universal Discourse, you should be. They also do research streams. Their area of research is different than mine. They're totally super knowledgeable. And until next time, take care, be well, be kind.
Hey, I didn't.
Corey
Technically,
Campbell,
you
hey.
Hey, got
Corey, how are you? I was just talking about you for no particular reason. Or is that our Corey Campbell? Evening. are, Corey?